I was dying. Blood filled my eyes. Everything went dark, and the noise of sirens faded into nothing. When I woke up, I wasn't me anymore. I mean, I was still me, Lin Xian, but I was inside someone else's body, in a completely different world. A world with swords, magic, and monsters. My name now is Eric Tross. I'm a baron and the lord of a small place called Eagle Town in the Tasman Kingdom. My father was a retired senior knight who earned this title through years of war. He died recently from old wounds that finally caught up with him, and I inherited everything: his land, his title, his problems. Lucky for me, I got something extra when I arrived. A golden finger, a cheap power. Right after I took over as lord, a glowing countdown appeared in front of me that only I could see. When it hit 0, it asked me if I wanted to draw a card. I said yes, and a white card appeared in my hand. On it was a picture of a powerful knight in silver armor named Rashid Paloma, with a star symbol in the corner. Then it asked if I wanted to make the card real. I chose yes, and just like that, Rashid stepped out of the card and into my world. A real, living knight, loyal to me. He's in junior knight, but he's got combat skills, alchemical armor, and a proper knight's sword. He's stronger than anyone in Eagle Town, including me. The countdown resets to 30 days each time, so I get one new card every month. Right now, there are 3 days left until my next draw. I can't help feeling excited about it. But today I had trouble to deal with first. My steward Weiss came to tell me that a magical beast, a wind leopard, had attacked the cattle ranch on the south side of town. We lost 5 camel bulls. The beast slipped past our defenses because Philip, the knight who was supposed to be guarding the area, completely failed to notice it. Philip has been the only knight in Eagle Town for a long time, and he's not happy that I split his authority by bringing Rashid in. His excuse for missing the leopard was weak. He claimed it must have been wandering south of town, avoiding detection. I wasn't buying it. When Rashid returned from his patrol near the Tana Mountains to the north, I called him in right away. Winter was settling over Eagle Town, frost hanging from the rooftops, and cold wind rushed in with him when he opened the door. I felt bad pulling him in before he even had a chance to warm up with some hot butter pie, but I needed him. I told him about the beast problem at the ranch and asked if he could handle it. He didn't hesitate. His armor rang as he straightened up and swore he would cut down anything that stood in Eagle Town's way. I sent him to find Eleonora at the ranch. She'd help him track the creature. After he left, I unrolled the leather map on my desk and stared at it quietly, thinking about everything that lay ahead. I've been studying the map of this world, the Ring Continent. It's not a safe place. To the north live the orcs, brutal and savage. To the south lies an endless forest with trees hundreds of meters tall, home to the elves, beautiful, deadly archers. And in the east, that's where humans built their great kingdom, the Tasman Kingdom, where over 90% of all humans live. We survive thanks to our knights, who fight using a power called chi, and our mages, who use spiritual energy to cast spells. There are also rarer professions like alchemists and beast tamers, but knights and mages are the backbone of humanity. My town, Eagle Town, sits at the kingdom's northeastern edge in Ileade province. Just north of us is the Tana Mountain Range, and beyond that, orc territory. That fact keeps me up at night. Any day, they could come pouring over those mountains. But there's some comfort. Something terrible happened in the Western continent recently. The dead started rising, and the goblin mechanical city, the Western superpower, was destroyed. Every race on the continent is struggling with the aftermath, so the orcs probably don't have the energy to invade us right now. One morning at Eagle Fort, I was enjoying Aunt Bev's yellow fruit soup. Tangy, sweet, impossible to stop eating, when Steward Weiss came in with news. Rashid had found the wind leopard that attacked our camel bull herd and was chasing it down. I smiled and hoped for good news. The camel bulls matter more than people might think. Eagle Town only has 2,300 people. After taxes to the kingdom, my monthly income is about 1,300 gold coins. The Camel Bull Ranch brings in another 1,100. Together, that's barely enough to pay for 2 knights, a guard squad, and my expenses as a noble. Losing those animals is like losing our foundation. I asked Weiss about Baru Nora, the man who leads our trade caravan. He takes our goods to nearby towns and brings back supplies I desperately need. Weiss figured the caravan would return in about half a month. I just hoped they'd make it back before the rivers froze over. After breakfast, I rode out to the guard post to deal with Philip. When I arrived, the two guards at the entrance bowed, but Philip strolled out casually. He wore his standard-issue armor, a thick beard on his face, and a smug look in his eyes. He greeted me politely enough with words, but he didn't bow. He just stood there, straight-backed, smiling up at me on my horse. I asked him why he wasn't out patrolling while a magical beast was still loose in our territory. His answer was dripping with mockery. He said that brave Sir Rashid surely had things under control and could protect my property just fine. I didn't waste more words on him. I ordered him to gather 20 soldiers and come with me to hunt down the winged leopard. He obeyed. He had to. No matter how much he resented me, openly defying a noble would get him hanged, even outside Eagle Town. The authority of nobility is absolute. Our entire guard force is only 100 men. According to town records, that's the lowest it's ever been, both in population and soldiers. It's not my fault, and it wasn't my father's either. The whole Tasman Kingdom is at its weakest point in history, and the reason traces back to that catastrophe in the west. The dead rose, the undead wailed, and the world changed. Every race is paying the price. But right now, I had a leopard to kill. I rode out at the front with Philip beside me, both of us on horseback. The 20 soldiers behind us had to run on foot. Horses are a luxury in Eagle Town, and we don't even have 10 in the whole place. We reached the Camel Bull Ranch in about 15 minutes. The herd is only around 100 animals, but they're valuable. Camel bulls are huge, taller than a man, with broad backs perfect for hauling cargo. They're strong, tireless, and always in demand across the region. On top of the regular ones, we also have one leader-class camel bull that's reached magical beast level, plus 7 sub-rank ones. Eleonora, the woman in charge of the ranch, came to greet me. She had fresh wounds on her face from trying to stop the winged leopard. She dropped to one knee, trembling, begging for punishment because she couldn't protect the herd. I told her it wasn't her fault. She's just a knight apprentice, and a ranked magical beast is way beyond what she could handle. Then I turned to Philip, my voice cold. I asked who was responsible for the southern defense line. His smug expression froze. He told me it was Enru Dowland's squad. When I took over as Lord, I split the 100 guards into 10 squads of 10. 5 squads go to Rashid for outside work, hunting, scouting, resource exploration. The other 5 go to Philip for town security and perimeter watch. I made my decision on the spot. Everyone in Enru's squad would be stripped of their status as free citizens and demoted to slaves. In Eagle Town, there are 3 classes. At the top are retainer knights like Rashid and Philip. Below them are free citizens who pay taxes but keep what they earn. At the bottom are slaves, the Lord's property, who work for nothing. Philip couldn't believe it. He blurted out that the punishment was too harsh. I shut him down fast. I reminded him that a perimeter post guards the survival of the entire territory. What if it hadn't been one beast, but a full orc invasion? Then I asked him point blank, was he questioning his lord? Was he challenging noble authority? That scared him. He went pale, dropped to one knee, and begged forgiveness. He knew the law. Openly defying even the lowest noble, a baron like me, would get a retainer knight destroyed. He'd only spoken up because losing his men's respect as captain worried him more in that moment. I forgave him graciously. I told him I believed it wasn't his intention to offend. He thanked me and stood up, but I could see the bitter resignation in his face. I asked Ellie which direction Rashid had gone. She told me he'd chased the wind leopard east toward Breeze Lake and planned to kill it there. We rode out to join him. When we arrived at the lakeshore, Rashid was furious, yelling at a soldier named Charles Eno for failing to seal off a defensive line on time, letting all their effort go to waste. But when Rashid saw me approaching, he dropped the scolding and came to report. The wind leopard had broken through and escaped toward the Tana Mountains. That struck me as strange. A wind leopard is only a low-level beast. It had run from the ranch in the south, all the way to Breeze Lake in the east, and now was heading north to the mountains, circling half of Eagle Town without stopping once. Wind leopards are actually known for poor stamina. This didn't make sense. Rashid agreed. Normally the creature should have been exhausted by the time it reached the lake. Philip couldn't resist a jab. He suggested maybe Rashid hadn't tried hard enough and was just making excuses. Rashid fired back, telling Philip to challenge him to a duel anytime if he had a problem. Philip just scoffed quietly. He knew he couldn't beat Rashid and wasn't stupid enough to try. I cut the argument short. I ordered Philip to take the soldiers back to Eagle Town. Rashid and I would continue the chase with one squad. Win or lose, the leopard had at least been driven out of our territory. We followed the winged leopard's trail all the way to the foot of the Tana Mountains, until the tracks disappeared at a place called Haunted Hollow. The locals gave it that name because someone once heard wailing sounds coming from inside, like ghosts crying. Guards checked it out before and found nothing. They figured it was just wind passing through the rocks making strange noises. I decided we should go in and have a look. A few minutes inside, we picked up the leopard's trail again. Rashid found blood on the rocks, still wet. The beast had been wounded during the earlier chase, and it couldn't have passed through long ago. Rashid was excited. The hollow appeared to be a dead end, so the leopard was trapped. We had to leave the horses behind as the path got too narrow and rough. Walking on foot, I noticed dark-colored stones scattered on the ground. I asked Rashid about them, but he'd never been here either. He'd spent his whole month in Eagle Town patrolling the mountains. Then a quiet voice spoke up. It was Charles, the same soldier Rashid had been scolding earlier at the lake. He said the stones looked like black rock, or his family ran a blacksmith shop, so he recognized the material. It's not a high-grade ore, but it's the standard stuff used to make weapons and armor for regular armies. Still valuable. The deeper we went, the more fragments littered the ground. Nothing grew here. I started wondering if there might be a whole mineral vein hidden inside. Then Rashid called out. There was a cave ahead. It was the only way forward, so I ordered everyone into alert formation. Rashid took the lead with his sword drawn, and the squad formed two lines behind him. The cave was pitch black inside. Rashid pulled out a light orb, an alchemical item that cost me 20 gold coins, and it wasn't even a ranked piece of equipment. Alchemists really do burn through money. He rubbed the crystal sphere, and it lit up, pushing back the darkness. That's when we saw the wind leopard. It was lying on the ground in an open area, covered in wounds, already dead. Its blood had soaked into neatly stacked piles of black rock, or all around it. But the leopard wasn't what made my heart jump. Charles screamed it first. Kobolds. Dog-headed humanoid creatures were hiding behind the ore piles. Sharp teeth, pointed claws, crude weapons, short spears and mining picks. Once the light exposed them, they stopped hiding and stepped out to face us. I counted 11. Only one of them was a junior-ranked beastman. The rest were weaker. That calmed me down a lot. Rashid drew his sword and took a combat stance, but I stepped forward. I reminded the kobolds that the great orc chieftain had forbidden beastmen from entering human territory, and I wanted an explanation. The leader, a kobold with black fur around its neck, stepped forward and lowered his spear to show he didn't want to fight. He said they meant no harm. Kobolds love mining, he told me. They were only here for the ore. I narrowed my eyes and thought it over. If what he said was true, then there really was a black rock or vein in this place. I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement inside. I smiled at the black-furred kobold and explained the situation plainly. Haunted Hollow belongs to Eagle Town, my territory. According to the Calamity Pact, humans and beastmen agreed to use the Tana Mountains as a border, and neither side is allowed to cross. That pact was signed because of the undead disaster in the west. When the dead started rising, they wiped out the goblin nation so fast that everyone realized no single race could fight them alone. The Ring Tower, the most powerful organization on the continent, called all the races together to form an alliance. To keep everyone from backstabbing each other while fighting the undead, they signed the Calamity Pact. No invading each other's land, or the whole alliance comes down on you. So these kobolds were in the wrong, and they knew it. I gave them two choices. First option, leave immediately and never set foot in Tasman Kingdom territory again. Honestly, even if I reported this to the kingdom, they wouldn't do much, just tell me to kick them out. Border scuffles over a dozen miners aren't worth a diplomatic incident. The black-furred one asked about the second option. I told them they could join my territory. I'd let them mine here, give them tools, shelter, and food. But everything they dug up would belong to me, since it came from my land. He refused right away. He said that was basically working for free with no pay. I was a little surprised. I'd expected beastmen to be simpler than that. But then again, This one had reached junior rank, so his mind was sharper than the others. I told him I was sorry to hear that, and if he refused the second option, I'd have no choice but to drive them out. Of course, I added, they could try to resist, but my knights would run them through without hesitation. Rashid drew his alchemical sword on cue. The blade sang as it cut through the air. The other guards pulled their weapons too. The kobolds snarled and raised their spears. But only for a moment. Rashid moved like lightning. He launched forward, kicking up dust, and swung his sword in a blazing arc. The kobolds didn't even have time to react. The black-furred one, their leader, named Dustbark, managed to block with his spear, but the impact snapped the weapon in half and sent him flying backward, crashing into two of his companions. The other kobolds went wild, ready to charge in and fight to the death. But Dustbark shouted them down, blood dripping from his mouth. He ordered them all to fall back. Once they'd retreated and calmed down, I raised my hand and signaled Rashid to stop. I told Dustbark I'd give him one more chance to choose. There wouldn't be a third. He chose to work for me. It was the smart move. He couldn't beat Rashid, and he couldn't be sure I'd actually let them leave alive if he picked option one. Besides, kobolds are natural-born miners. They don't just enjoy digging. The mineral energy inside or veins actually helps them grow stronger. Even if they kept the ore themselves, they'd just end up trading it to other races for food at bad prices. Working for me, at least they'd get shelter and meals. I dropped the cold look from my face and smiled warmly, welcoming them to my territory. I told Dustbark he'd find this to be a very fair deal. Behind me, I could feel my soldiers shifting uncomfortably. Charles muttered something about my smile giving him chills. To be honest, if Dustbark had refused my offer and tried to leave, I wouldn't have let them go. A lord can't trust kobolds. They're cunning by nature. Dead men don't cause problems. Well, usually. The undead plague in the West proved that wrong. But Dustbark made the smart choice, so I sat down and listened to his story. His tribe is tiny, not even 30 kobolds total, counting women and children. They're so weak that stronger tribes push them out to the edge of the wasteland, right up against the Tasman Kingdom border. While hunting in the Tana Mountains, Dustbark and his 10 adult warriors stumbled on a narrow passage cutting straight through the mountain. They followed it and came out on our side, inside Tasman Kingdom territory. That's when they found the ore vein in Haunted Hollow. Then Dustbark told me something that made my heart race. Their natural talent for sensing minerals told them this wasn't just any deposit. It was a giant class vein. Even for ordinary black rock, or a giant vein would generate profits equal to a small resource point. I could barely contain my excitement, but I kept my composure and asked about the passage. Dustbark said it was inside Haunted Hollow, hidden behind stones they'd piled over the entrance. Smart for a kobold. I sent Rashid to verify it with Dustbark and dispatched a soldier back to Eagle Town to bring 20 more guards. While waiting, I studied the terrain. Haunted Hollow is surrounded by hills on all sides, with a wide, flat area in the middle, long and narrow, perfect for building a small village. But I couldn't trust the kobolds yet. I need to keep Rashid stationed here to watch over everything. Rashid confirmed the hidden tunnel. I told Dustbark to send someone back through the mountains to bring over the rest of his tribe, the women, the children, everyone. Without the adult warriors protecting them, the weak ones wouldn't survive long on the other side anyway. I also told him to seal the mountainside entrance when they came back through. Soon the 20 reinforcements arrived from Eagle Town, led by 2 squad captains, Doug Downs and Benson Fells. These were from Philip's garrison. Combined with Rashid's 20 hunters already here, I finally felt secure about this place. I ordered Rashid to seal the tunnel once all the kobolds arrived, then build a village here and oversee the mining operation with the kobolds. On the ride back, I brought only Charles with me. I asked him about his family's blacksmith shop. His father was a free citizen who forged farm tools and basic swords. I wanted to know if any of Eagle Town's 3 blacksmiths could make armor. Charles thought about it and said his father couldn't, and neither could Tiger at the second shop. The only possibility was Moreau Hall at the Big Hammer Smithy, but even that wasn't certain. I wasn't surprised. A small town like ours was never going to have top-tier craftsmen. Back at Eagle Fort, I called Steward Wyson right away. I told him we'd found an iron mine at Haunted Hollow, and I wanted to build a village there. He was thrilled, practically called it a blessing from the gods. He agreed it was the right move for protecting the vein and managing the mining. I told him Rashid was already stationed there, but we needed workers and craftsmen to support the operation. Most importantly, the new village, Black Rock Village, needed a civil administrator. I asked Weiss what he thought about Daniel for the job. I called Daniel Gray into Eagle Fort and gave him his orders. Daniel is Steward Weiss's only son, about my age. He grew up alongside me and spent years helping his father manage Eagle Town's affairs. He's one of the few people here with real education and administrative experience. His night talent is terrible. He never even made it to apprentice level, but his mind is sharp. I told him to go to Haunted Hollow and build Blackrock Village. The key rules: only slave-class citizens would be relocated there, and no one was allowed to leave without good reason. Secrecy was everything. As far as the outside world was concerned, we'd found a small mine, not a giant vein. Daniel was fired up. Weiss reminded him not to rush things, to be patient and careful. Daniel smiled at his father and told him to trust both his son and his own teaching. I liked his confidence. He got everything organized in a single day and marched out with dozens of workers and supplies the next morning. Once he was gone, I went to Eagle Fort's training room with something special, a black pearl, smooth and round, about the size of an egg. It had been found inside the wind leopard's body when the butchers cut it open. Nobody who handled it was a ranked fighter, so none of them noticed anything unusual. But the moment I held it, I could sense an enormous, bottomless energy hiding inside. That explained why the leopard had kept running for so long without stopping. This pearl had been fueling it. I decided to test it. I sat down and began practicing my Gale breathing method, the technique my father passed down to me. It's a mid-grade breathing method, better than the basic ones most barons have. Knights train by absorbing qi from the world through these breathing techniques, using it to temper their bodies and strengthen their meridians. As I breathed, I felt the qi gathering around me as usual, green-tinted streams flowing into my body, matching my wind attribute. But then something else happened. An invisible force burst from the pearl in my hand, instantly transformed into wind qi, and rushed into my body alongside everything else. It was like nothing I'd ever felt. My training speed multiplied beyond anything I thought possible. The qi inside me kept building and building until it hit a critical point. My body felt like it was being torn apart by an invisible force, and then a wave of power exploded outward from within me. My mind and body reached a completely new level of harmony. I broke through, from peak junior knight to mid-level knight, just like that. I stared at the pearl in my hand, amazed. This thing was a training cheat code. I decided to call it the Breakthrough Pearl, since it was the reason I'd advanced. I'd keep it hidden when I wasn't training. If any other ranked fighter got near it, they'd sense something was off. I had a feeling the pearl could do more than what I'd just seen. I'd explore that later. I stood up and tested my new strength, throwing a punch at the air. The chi force shook my door, rattling it loudly. My power had multiplied several times over. I'd honestly expected Rashid to be the first in Eagle Town to reach mid-level knight. Turns out I beat him to it. Then it hit me. The Breakthrough Pearl felt a lot like a second cheat power, just like the card system. Almost as if the world heard that thought. A glowing panel appeared before my eyes. Would you like to draw a card? I glanced out the window. It was already dark outside. Has it really been that long? I whispered. The countdown was up. It was time for my second draw. The glowing panel floated before me, and my heart was pounding. My first card had given me Rashid, a peak junior knight with full ranked equipment and combat skills. He'd been invaluable since I took over Eagle Town. Now I was about to draw again. I tapped confirm. The panel shattered into dozens of cards spinning in the air, all facing away from me, so I couldn't see their fronts. Purple patterns glowed on their backs with streaks of light. After a moment, one card drifted down and slowly turned to face me. The image showed a short, stocky figure, thick limbs, heavy battle-scarred armor with dirt at the joints, a bushy brown beard hanging to his chest, and sharp little eyes under dense eyebrows. Behind him was an ancient mountain mine shrouded in gray mist. He was swinging a massive hammer, forging something. A dwarf. The name at the bottom read, Mill Savage Hammer. Then I noticed something. In the top left corner, there were 2 stars instead of 1. Rashid's card had 1 star. This was a 2-star card. I'd played enough card games in my previous life to know what that meant. a higher grade. I chose to materialize the card without hesitation. Purple light exploded through the room. When it faded, a burly dwarf warrior stood in the center of my chamber, gripping an enormous war hammer, scanning his surroundings with suspicion. His eyes landed on me, and he frowned. I welcomed him warmly. He grumbled that his name was Mill Savagehammer, from a distant dwarf tribe. He remembered falling into endless darkness after some battle, and couldn't understand how he'd ended up here. Same story as Rashid, from a different world entirely, killed in combat, then pulled into existence through my card. I told him I'd freed him from that darkness using powerful magic, and that the price was his loyalty. He didn't like the word, loyalty. I could see the defiance flash in his eyes, and he stepped forward to argue. But something deep in his soul stopped him. The card's bond took hold, and the words that came out were, "I pledge my loyalty, my lord." I told him the card's magic made disobedience impossible, but I wasn't interested in blind obedience. I'd give him respect and honor. We were both strangers from other worlds, just trying to survive. He thought it over, then looked me in the eye and declared he feared no battle and would fight for me. Whether it was genuine loyalty or the card's compulsion, I didn't really care. As long as he served faithfully, that was enough. The next morning, I took Mill to the training ground to test his strength. I put on my silver armor and drew my sword. Even though I'd just broken through to mid-level knight, I knew the gap between us would be huge. He was a 2-star summon, after all, but I wanted to see exactly how big that gap was. It was enormous. Mill's first swing sent dust flying everywhere. I dodged and counterattacked, stabbing toward his side. He simply blocked with the hammer shaft. The impact sent a jolt through my arms so hard I nearly dropped my sword. The force was unbelievable. I circled him, looking for openings. He kept turning, never giving me his back. I tried to feint to the left, then darted right and aimed for his legs. Mill slammed his hammer into the ground, used the rebound to launch himself into the air, and brought the hammer crashing down on me from above. I raised my sword to block. The collision drove me to one knee and left a deep dent in the ground beneath me. "All right, Mill, I give up," I shouted quickly, pain shooting through my body. Privately, I was thinking, dwarves really are straightforward. If I hadn't called it off, this guy might have actually hammered me into a pancake. After my sparring match with Mill, I learned exactly where I stood. His gear, the hammer and armor, were all ranked equipment, just like Rashid's, except Mill's were dwarf-forged rather than alchemical. We both held back during the fight, neither of us using our combat techniques. But even so, the gap was obvious. Mill was at peak mid-level warrior. With his ranked equipment on top of that, he'd be nearly unbeatable against anyone at the same level. That suited me fine. The stronger Mill was, the safer I felt in this world. What I hadn't expected was the audience. Philip had been waiting nearby and watched the whole fight. Steward Weiss was happy. He didn't really understand knight power levels, so he just saw his lord getting stronger. But Philip was a trained knight. He could tell immediately that I'd broken through to mid-level, surpassing him. And he saw how easily the mysterious dwarf had beaten me, which meant Mill's strength was terrifying. On top of that, Mill was clearly loyal to me. I could see Philip's mind spinning, shock, jealousy, confusion all mixed together. I invited Philip to my study. He followed in silence. I sat behind my oak desk and picked up a letter stamped with the Earl's family seal. A few days ago, Earl Rep had sent a summons. A passage to the underground world had been discovered at Tulip Fortress, and dark creatures were pouring out. The Earl required each baron under him to send at least one knight. I told Philip I was sending him. He didn't take it well. He stood up and stepped forward, his voice rising. He said he'd served faithfully, but ever since Rashid arrived, I'd forgotten about him. Now I was shipping him off to a dangerous place. He couldn't accept it. I told him straight. He was too stubborn and proud. His bravery was never in question, but a knight's honor isn't just about fighting. It's about obeying orders. This mission was both a test and a chance to redeem himself. He struggled with it. For a long moment, he just stood there with his fists clenched. Then he took a deep breath, knelt again, and said he understood. He would go to Tulip Fortress and prove his loyalty through action. I told him to take 2 retainers and wished him well. He walked out into the sunlight, armor gleaming. Watching him leave, I let out a quiet sigh. Half a month passed. Weiss came to my study with a thick ledger to report on Black Rock Village. Daniel had done excellent work. The village was built in the flat center of Haunted Hollow. Workers and craftsmen had put up houses over the past 2 weeks, and both the human workers and the kobolds had shelter now. Wooden fences surrounded the village, watchtowers were set up, and guards patrolled day and night. During this time, I discovered something valuable about Mill. He wasn't just a powerful fighter, but also a skilled blacksmith. That changed my plans. I sent him to Black Rock Village permanently. Being close to the mine made forging convenient, and having a peak mid-level warrior stationed there meant I didn't have to worry about the kobolds causing trouble. It also freed up soldiers I'd been keeping there. Rashid was already on his way back to Eagle Town with 30 guards. Weiss reported that mining was going smoothly. Dozens of miners were working alongside the kobolds, who were natural diggers. They'd already extracted quality black rock, or that would fetch good prices at market. I told Weiss to make sure Daniel kept managing the village carefully and to look after the workers' needs. A happy village is a productive village. After Weiss left, I sat alone in my study, thinking about what Black Rock Village could become. Our territory's future was starting to take shape. Winter had arrived. Cold wind cut through the streets of Eagle Town, though no snow had fallen yet. I was in my study working through paperwork when Weiss burst in, barely able to contain himself. The trade caravan was back. Baru Nora had returned with a full load of goods. I jumped up and headed straight to the town square with Weiss. Baru was already there, walking at the front of a line of camel bulls loaded with cargo, their breath turning to white mist in the cold air. He looked rough, skin darkened by wind, beard growing wild after a month on the road. But his eyes lit up the moment he saw me. He dropped to one knee and reported that the mission was a success. This was his first time leading the caravan, so his excitement was understandable. I told him to stand and give me the details. He was organized and thorough. They'd sold our camel bull wool and milk at the trading market for solid prices. The wool was popular for its softness and warmth, and the milk for its rich taste. That gave them the funds for everything else. Then they'd gone to Seaview Town, where they met Baron Will Nash. The Baron was very interested in our camel bulls, and Baru managed to sign a rental agreement for camel bulls leased to him for a steady income. This was already one of our key businesses, so I was pleased. The real highlight: Baru had brought back 5 quality war horses, carefully selected from a distant horse ranch. Strong, fast, and built for endurance. With Eagle Town having fewer than 10 horses total, this was a big deal. He'd also purchased grain to get us through winter, metal or for the blacksmith shops, tools, cloth, and medicine, everything we desperately needed. The downside was the cost. Between the war horses and all the supplies, there was barely any gold left over. I didn't blame him. Those purchases were worth more than coins in the bank. Back at Eagle Fort, I sat by the fire and listened to his full report. I quietly added up our finances in my head. After building Black Rock Village, I had less than 5,000 gold coins remaining. Eagle Town's growth was still in its early stages. We were poor, no getting around it. I mentioned Seaview Town for a moment, then stopped myself. Something about our relationship with Baron Nash's territory bothered me, but now wasn't the time to get into it. I told Baru to rest up and take his reward from Weiss. Then I shared some good news. We'd found a black rock or vein, so next time the caravan went out, they wouldn't need to buy or anymore. In fact, they'd be selling it. His eyes went wide with excitement. I reminded him to keep it quiet for now. He thanked me, but before leaving, he paused. There was one more thing he needed to report. Baru had one more thing to tell me before leaving. On the way home, the caravan had found an injured brother and sister on the road. They'd been badly hurt, so the traders rescued them. By the time they reached Eagle Town, the two wanted to stay and swear loyalty to me. The brother was a junior knight, and that caught my attention. A real knight wanting to join Eagle Town? I was interested, but I needed to know who they were first. I couldn't just accept strangers blindly. I told Baru to bring them in. About 10 minutes later, 2 young people walked into my room. The brother, Lucas Bear, was clean and well-presented despite his simple clothes, sharp features, straight posture, though his hands were clenched with nerves. His sister Lisa hid behind him, peeking out with a pale, timid face. I asked them directly. They wanted to join Eagle Town and serve me. Lucas knelt and told me their story. They were commoners, wanderers with no home. They'd been attacked by a magical beast in the mountains and would have died if my caravan hadn't saved them. They were tired of drifting and wanted to settle here. Lisa stepped out just enough to add that Eagletown felt safe, and they truly wanted to stay. I looked at Lucas and told him that reaching junior knight from a commoner background was genuinely impressive. He was honest with me. He'd only used the basic chi drawing technique, the lowest, most common breathing method in the Tasman Kingdom. It has no elemental attribute and can only get you to the junior knight threshold. Without a proper breathing method matching his element, he was stuck. He knew I was a noble and might have the right breathing method for him. In exchange, he'd give me his absolute loyalty. I understood his situation well. My own gale breathing method was a mid-grade wind technique, far above what most barons possessed. As a noble, I also had basic breathing methods for all four elements: flame breathing for fire, rock earth breathing for earth, water flow breathing for water, and breeze breathing for wind. On top of those, Rashid had contributed a junior fire method called flowing fire breathing. Mill's system was different entirely. Dwarves train as warriors, not knights, and he'd given me a technique called the black stone body forging method. I told Lucas that joining Eagletown meant absolute loyalty and heavy responsibility. He swore on his honor as a knight. No second thoughts, ever. He added that Lisa was skilled in herbalism and could contribute too. She stepped forward and bowed, promising to work hard. I liked their determination. I accepted them both into Eagletown and told Lucas I'd provide him a suitable breathing method after arrangements were made. They were so moved they nearly cried, kneeling again to thank me. But I didn't give Lucas the breathing method right away. I went up to my study, looked at the collection of techniques, then turned around and left without taking any. This was a test. I needed to see if he had patience and loyalty, or if he'd start complaining the moment things didn't go his way. 3 days passed. I had Weiss assign Lucas to the guard post as a regular soldier and gave no further orders. Lisa started getting anxious. She asked her brother why I still hadn't given him the breathing method. But Lucas understood. He was calm. He figured out exactly what I was doing. If they lost patience, if they went around asking about the breathing method or said anything negative about me, they'd be gone from Eagletown quickly. He told Lisa to be patient and trust the process. Still, those 3 days opened Lucas's eyes. Even the lowest guards in Eagletown ate better and lived better than he ever had as a wandering commoner knight. It hit him hard. The gap between nobility and commoners felt impossible to cross. Then, on the 3rd day, a guard came running in. Steward Weiss had arrived at the guard post with orders from me. Lucas's eyes lit up. Finally, he said, I sent Rashid to the guard post with 2 things for Lucas: a promotion and a breathing method. Rashid announced that I was appointing Lucas as captain of the garrison, 40 soldiers under his command, responsible for Eagletown's security. Lucas was surprised but kept his composure and swore he wouldn't let me down. Then Rashid handed him the rock earth breathing method. It was only a basic level technique, so its value to me wasn't great, but for Lucas it was everything. The key to advancing beyond junior knight. Rashid warned him that breathing methods are protected by kingdom law. Sharing one with anyone means execution. Lucas understood perfectly. I'd also told Rashid to do something extra. He'd just broken through to mid-level knight that morning, the second in Eagletown after me, and I had him deliberately release his aura so Lucas could feel the pressure. A little reminder of where Lucas stood in the pecking order. The timing couldn't have been better. I wasn't worried about Lucas leaking the breathing method. It was just a basic technique, and the consequences were too severe. Breathing methods are how nobles maintain control over commoners in this kingdom. Any noble who caught someone spreading one illegally would hang the offender without a second thought. No one would risk their neck to protect a junior knight breaking the law. Rashid also had good news from the hunting squad. Charles Eno, the soldier from the blacksmith family who'd identified the ore, had reached knight apprentice level. That made 5 apprentices in the hunting squad now. Rashid had clearly been pushing his men hard, and it was showing results. I told him to let Charles lead his own squad of 10 and to start recruiting new soldiers to bring us back up to 100. After Rashid left, I stood on top of Eagle Fort and looked out over the town. Frost coated the rooftops. The wind cut into my skin like a blade. Winter was here. Every year, people in Eagletown froze to death during the cold months. I didn't want that to happen on my watch. I took Weiss on a full inspection of the town. We started at the granary. I checked the grain myself, feeling the kernels for dryness and quality. The supply was decent, but I ordered dry straw spread along the floor and walls to keep moisture out. One batch of spoiled grain could threaten the whole town. Next, we visited the blacksmith shops. The forges were burning hot, hammers ringing as the smiths worked on tools and weapons. I picked up a freshly made axe, tested its weight and edge. Good enough. I told Weiss to keep the shops running day and night. People needed axes for firewood and tools for repairs. And I ordered extra warm clothing for the blacksmiths so they could keep working through the cold. Then we walked through the residential area. Most houses were wooden, and in the wind they felt thin and exposed. I stepped inside one home. Even with a fire going, cold air crept through every crack. I decided immediately we'd organize teams to collect clay and dry grass, seal up the gaps in every house, and add an extra layer of thatching to the roofs. By the time the sun was setting, I had a full plan forming in my head. Back at Eagle Fort, Weiss and I worked late into the night, going through every detail. This winter, I was going to keep everyone alive. No one in Eagle Town would freeze or starve to death. Not while I was Lord. The early winter wind came howling from the east, carrying the smell of sea salt. A knight from Seaview Town arrived at my gates, Roderick Tice, one of Baron Nash's 2 mid-level knights, riding in with frost on his armor and dried seaweed clinging to his cloak. I was studying a new pasture map when Weiss brought him in. I poured him a cup of camel bull milk wine to warm him up, then asked what brought him here. He got straight to business. Baron Nash wanted to buy the 4 camel bulls we'd rented to Seaview Town permanently. He offered triple the rental price, plus 10 good horses. I slammed the leather reins down on the table. Our camel bulls aren't simple merchandise. Eagle Town has 117 of them, and they're the foundation of everything: farming, transport, and over 1,000 gold coins in monthly income. Without that money, we couldn't buy enough food to survive winter. I told Roderick to tell his baron that unless he was willing to trade a salt mine, the answer was no. That shook him. A salt mine for 4 ordinary camel bulls was wildly uneven, and he knew it. But I wasn't trying to be fair. I was setting the price high enough to shut down the conversation. Then Roderick pulled out a badge with a blue gemstone and changed the subject entirely. He proposed a marriage alliance. Baron Nash had a daughter, Catherine, 18 years old. If I married her, Seaview Town would open its harbor to Eagle Town. Their port connected directly to the sea, fishing, merchant ships, ocean trade. I won't lie, it was tempting. Access to the sea would open up enormous possibilities. But Eagle Town wasn't ready for ocean ventures yet, and I had more pressing concerns. I told him I needed half a month to consider it and would send my answer by carrier pigeon. Then I asked the real question: why us? Seaview Town had always looked down on Eagle Town. They had far better options for a marriage alliance. Why would they pick the poorest barony on the border? Roderick dropped the act. Winter had come early this year. Seaview Town's port was about to freeze solid. They needed our camel bulls to haul their fish products overland to the interior cities during the ice season. For them, this marriage was a lifeline. In return, he offered us use of their docks, salted fish at half-market price, and come spring, their ships could carry our leather and wool to the eastern trading ports where inland goods fetched high prices. It sounded good on paper. But then old memories rose up, not mine, but recorded in Eagle Town's chronicles. 1 year ago, Baron Nash had stolen a fishing ground on the border between our territories. My father, the old Baron Eric, had just taken over Eagle Town when it was at its poorest. He had no choice but to give up the fishing ground in exchange for enough food to survive winter. But Nash sent moldy grain as payment. Rotten, worthless grain. My father was so furious he had to sell his own battle armor, the one he'd worn through years of war, just to buy real food for the town. He'd planned to settle the score after winter. He was a senior knight, far stronger than Nash's mid-level rank. But his old war injuries flared up, pinning him to his bed until he died. I stood up so fast my cloak knocked over the wine cup. I told Roderick that Eagle Town hadn't forgotten who sent us spoiled grain as compensation. The warmth drained from my voice. I told him to stay the night and leave in the morning, and I suggested he keep away from the pastures. Our camel bulls don't take kindly to strangers. That night, as I sat alone, I thought about the situation carefully. Nash wanted the camel bulls, and if he couldn't get them, he wanted me, bound through marriage. Seaview Town's real goal was to control both sea and land trade routes, using Eagle Town's resources for their own profit. I had the giant black rock vein hidden away, worth more than they could imagine. I had time, and I had a grudge to settle. I knew Roderick would come for me that night. I'd been expecting it. While he thought I was sleeping, I sat in my study reading the Tasman Noble Legal Code. One passage stood out. Any knight who attacks a noble's residence without permission gets their eyes gouged out, hands cut off, and all property seized. I kept that page open. 2 hours earlier, I'd had Lucas steal Roderick's seat anchor badge from his escorts. It was already sitting in my desk drawer. I'd ordered the garrison to surround the building quietly. The moment Roderick made his move, his companions would be captured. Lucas peeked through the curtain and confirmed everything was in position. I glanced at my family crest on the wall, the golden eagle with ruby eyes, wings spread, ready to strike. Seaview Town still thought we were helpless lambs. It was time to teach them otherwise. I heard glass shatter on the second floor. Lucas reached for his sword, but I stopped him. "Let him in," I said. "I want to see just how low a Seaview Town knight will sink." Then I sent Lucas to handle Roderick's men outside. Roderick crept through the broken window, ice crunching under his boots. He carried a three-edged spike, a poisoned assassin's weapon with barbed hooks, designed to tear open arteries. So much for knightly honor. When he pushed open the door, he found me sitting calmly at my desk, spinning his own town's badge between my fingers. Rashid stood by the window in full armor, sword drawn, moonlight gleaming off the blade. Roderick's face went white. He threw the spike at Rashid, but Rashid moved like a snake, caught it with his sword, yanked it aside, then closed the distance in a heartbeat. His blade arced through the air in a crescent slash. The impact sent Roderick flying. Before he could recover, Rashid was on him again. Flowing fire slash, his sword came down like a hammer. Roderick raised his own blade to block, but the 10-year companion's sword snapped in half with a sharp crack. Blood splattered on the wall. Rashid's sword point pressed against Roderick's throat. I stood and read him the law. Article 108. A knight breaking into a noble's residence at night is a direct offense against the Lord's dignity. And he brought an assassin's weapon on top of it. I lifted his cloak with my sword tip, exposing the sea anchor crest underneath. Then I leaned in close, almost nose to nose with his bleeding face, and asked the real question. Why was Seaview Town so desperate for our camel bulls this year? Normally their port stockpiles lasted through winter. Roderick cracked. A giant sea serpent had appeared off the east coast 3 months ago. It had flipped 3 of Nash's merchant ships and eaten the sailors down to the bone. No ship dared go out anymore. Half the fish stockpile in the port had rotted. If they couldn't transport goods inland soon, Seaview Town would face famine by spring. Suddenly things made sense. On the way home, Baru had mentioned coastal fishing villages emptying out, with people saying the sea god was angry. It was this deep-sea monster all along. So Nash needed my camel bulls to open an inland trade route. But instead of negotiating honestly, he'd sent his knight to assassinate me and take control by force. I ordered Rashid to throw Roderick in the dungeon under heavy guard. Then I sat down and wrote my terms on parchment. Roderick's life in exchange for 300 slaves and 20 cartloads of sea salt. Rashid suggested I could also send evidence of the break-in to Earl Rep, which would strip Nash of his territorial authority. But I thought about it and decided Nash would more likely just claim Roderick had gone rogue and betrayed Seaview Town. That way he'd dodge most of the consequences. I sealed the letter in a copper case stamped with my eagle crest. As I worked, a thought crossed my mind. The kobolds in the mine dig 3 times faster than humans. Maybe I could hire some out to help Seaview Town clear ice from their port. For a fee, of course. Down in the dungeon, Roderick huddled on a pile of straw, listening to footsteps above him. His fate was now just another piece on the bargaining table between 2 barons. And back in Seaview Town, Baron Nash was screaming at warehouses full of rotting fish, completely unaware his knight had already failed. My letter hit Baron Nash exactly where it hurt. I demanded 300 slaves and 20 cartloads of sea salt in exchange for Roderick's life. What I got back was even better than expected. Nash offered 500 slaves instead, though he claimed he couldn't provide the salt. His excuse was that storms had destroyed the salt fields, but I knew the truth. The giant sea serpent had wrecked 70% of their coastal salt wells, and the remaining salt workers were too terrified to go near the water. Nash was desperate. His port was freezing over, his fish stockpiles were rotting, and his grain stores were nearly empty. Those 500 people weren't generosity. They were mouths he couldn't afford to feed anymore. He was dumping his problem onto me and calling it a peace offering. He even threw in a bag of port tax coins as an apology for Roderick's behavior. But there was a catch. Nash demanded I swear never to report the assassination attempt to Earl Representative. He knew that if the Earl found out, he'd use Article 108 of the Noble Legal Code to seize control of Seaview Town's port, something the Earl had wanted for years. Nash was cornered, and he knew it. He also forced Roderick to sign a confession saying the break-in was a personal grudge, completely unrelated to Seaview Town. A way to cut himself loose from the crime if things went sideways later. Roderick signed it. He had no choice. His family ring was sitting at the bottom of the box they brought him, a silent reminder of everything he'd lose by refusing. What Nash didn't know was that Roderick had already told me about the sea serpent. And Roderick didn't tell Nash's messenger that I already knew. So Nash was keeping a secret that wasn't actually secret anymore. That gave me an advantage he couldn't see. I accepted the deal. 500 slaves was a windfall. I told Weiss to have Daniel prepare shelter and food at Black Rock Village immediately. Those people would work the mine and speed up our production massively. But I meant what I'd said before. I didn't want anyone freezing or starving to death this winter, slaves included. They were people, and they were now my people. Weiss noticed the look in my eyes and probably understood that this deal was just the beginning. Our two territories were now tangled together, and the thread would only get tighter. I stood on top of Eagle Fort's tower and watched the snow begin to fall. Somewhere to the east, Seaview Town's port was icing over. Baron Nash was panicking over rotting fish and empty warehouses. And deeper still, beneath the frozen surface of the eastern sea, that giant serpent was waiting in the dark, watching, ready to strike again. This trade, this fragile peace, it was just the calm before the real storm. The 500 slaves arrived in a long gray line through the snow, wrapped in rags and straw. I watched them from the gate. Men, women, children with faces red from the cold, mothers shielding their little ones with torn skirts. Weiss stood beside me with his ledger, running the numbers. Black Rock Village currently had 130 people, including 28 kobolds and 20 guards. We could fit 300 more in the mine village if we built additional housing. The remaining 200 would stay in Eagle Town. Weiss suggested putting some in the old cellars inside the town walls. I turned that down immediately. Damp cellars breed disease. Instead, I ordered Lucas and his garrison to lead the slaves to the abandoned apple orchard on the east side of town, cut pine wood, and build simple cabins. Everyone would get 2 loaves of black bread a day. We just had to make it to spring, and then we could start farming new fields. By sunrise, the 500 were split into 2 groups. 300 headed north to Black Rock Village under Rashid's escort, their sleds loaded with new mining picks and warm leather coats. The 200 staying in town followed Lucas toward the eastern woods, each one given rough shoes and a wooden tag stamped with the eagle crest, proof they now belonged to Eagle Town. At Black Rock Village, Mill was already hard at work in his forge, hammering red-hot or into shape, shirtless despite the cold, his scarred body rippling with each swing. He shouted at the newcomers that if anyone slacked off, his hammer wouldn't care who they were. The kobolds watched the arriving humans with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Dustbark, their leader, sat at the mine entrance gnawing bread. When he smelled the wheat scent on the humans, the daily rations I'd promised, his tail thumped the ground. It was 100 times better than the rotten meat they'd eaten in the mountains. He made one thing clear to the human miners, though. They could dig the surface but the deep tunnels where the mineral energy flowed belonged to the kobolds. That energy was what made his people stronger, and their children were already licking mineral liquid from the rock cracks. Back in town, Lisa Beebear was moving through the construction site with her medicine box, treating workers. She found a girl, maybe 12 years old, curled up beside a lumber pile with whip marks on her ankles still bleeding. Lisa cleaned the wound with warm salt water and told her gently that nobody would beat her here. The girl started crying. She hadn't felt human kindness in 3 months. By evening, 20 cabin frames stood in the east field, smoke already rising from the first cooking fires. That's when Rashid returned, covered in snow and ice crystals that glittered on his silver armor like diamonds. He reported that all 300 were settled at the mine village. Mill had sent a message. Give him 20 blacksmith apprentices, and he could forge 50 extra sets of armor per month. I told Rashid we'd sort through the new arrivals for anyone with smithing skills and send them to Mill first. Then I smiled and asked Rashid how long it had been since we'd sparred. We headed to the training yard. Our swords clashed in showers of sparks. We were both mid-level knights now, and the fight was intense. His flowing fire slash sent waves of heat through the air, while my gale thrust carried cutting wind. When our chi collided overhead, it formed tiny whirlwinds that scattered wood shavings into the sky. Rashid told me my sword speed had improved by 30% since our last bout. He suggested concentrating my wind chi at the tip of the blade for better piercing power. The breakthrough pearl had been accelerating my training enormously. My mid-level knight foundation was rock solid now. After we finished, I looked out at the busy town and did the math out loud. By spring, I could expand the guard force to 200 soldiers. The mine could produce 3,000 gold coins a month, enough to fund 20 night squads. Rashid lowered his voice and shared intelligence from a spy he'd planted in Seaview Town. The sea serpent had been appearing more frequently, destroying 3 fishing villages already. He suggested we prepare. Mill had told him that black rock or mixed with magical beast blood could forge ranked armor. Right now, only Rashid and Mill had ranked equipment from their cards. I had just one ranked sword and not even a ranked suit of armor. Eagle Town was still too poor, but we were building. The 500 new people weren't just labor, they were wings for Eagle Town to spread. I turned to Rashid, my voice steady against the howling wind. Eagles don't wait for the storm to pass. They open their wings and fly through it. Behind us, Mill's hammering echoed from the mine village while saws buzzed in the east field. 500 souls, finding a new home in the cold. And somewhere deep beneath the eastern sea, the serpent was still waiting. This winter, we would grow strong enough to face whatever came next. 30 days had passed. The countdown hit 0 in my training room atop Eagle Fort, and the golden words appeared. Would you like to draw a card? My third draw since arriving in this world. I confirmed without hesitation. Cards spun in the air. 1 drifted down. 2 stars again, same rank as Mill. But when it flipped over, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It wasn't a person this time. It was a bird, a massive eagle. I took the card to the open terrace and chose to materialize it. The card exploded into a rain of light, and from it burst a gray-feathered eagle with a wingspan of over 6 meters. Its tail feathers gleamed like metal, its amber eyes were razor-sharp, and pale blue sparks of lightning crackled between its talons. The card had called it Thunderhawk, a mid-level magical beast that controlled wind and lightning. When I reached out to touch it, the eagle snapped at my fingers hard enough to crack a walnut. But the moment its beak brushed the eagle crest on my sleeve, it froze, bound by the card's contract, just like Rashid and Mill before it. It let out a piercing cry that shook snow off the walls. When I climbed onto its back, it shook its head in annoyance but didn't throw me off. It could carry me, though not for long flights, not yet. But its eyes could cover the entire territory from above. From now on, Thunderhawk would be my scout. Weiss arrived on the terrace, trembling at the sight of the enormous bird. He'd never seen anything like it. I explained it would serve as our eyes in the sky. Then Thunderhawk turned its head east and tensed. I followed its gaze towards Seaview Town. A strange black mist drifted above the sea horizon, traces of the giant serpent's activity. Meanwhile, Rashid had been pushing deeper into the Tana Mountains with his hunting squad. He'd grown bolder since reaching mid-level night. That day, Charles spotted huge paw prints in the snow, black slime around the edges. Ironback wolves, at least low-level magical beasts, traveling in a small pack. Rashid split his 20 men into 2 teams. He and Charles hit from the right, while Benson's group flanked left. When 7 ironback wolves exploded from behind a snow hill, the fight was brutal but fast. The wolves had iron-hard fur and armored bone plates on their spines. The pack leader was the size of a small horse, its breath reeking of blood. Rashid's flowing fire thrust punched through the lead wolf's defenses. He dodged its iron tail, sliced its hind leg, then threw his sword to pin another wolf's paw to the ground. With his bare hands, he grabbed a third wolf by its fangs and twisted its head backward. Benson's squad drove their spears through 2 more from the side. 15 minutes, 7 wolves dead. They harvested a dark red magic core from the alpha, a walnut-sized crystal with black veins swirling inside, and brought back the pelts and bone plates. When Rashid returned to Eagle Fort and saw Thunderhawk perched on the terrace in a custom saddle mill had made from camel bull leather and/or scraps, his jaw nearly dropped. But he kept his questions to himself, as a good subordinate should. He knelt and presented the magic core. I told him to send the wolf pelts to Lisa for winter armor and the bone plates to mill at Black Rock Village for tool improvements. Then Thunderhawk cried out overhead and dropped something at my feet, a blue-green scale it had carried back from the direction of Seaview Town. It smelled of salt and ocean, the same scent as the sea serpent Roderick had described. Seaview Town's problem was worse than I'd thought. The serpent was getting more active. I ordered Rashid to have Thunderhawk patrol the eastern stretch of the Tana Mountains every day starting tomorrow. We needed to know the moment that threat started moving our way. The 500 new arrivals had already transformed Eagle Town. The workshops ran through the night. Mining output at Black Rock Village doubled. The Ironback Wolf materials gave us enough to make 10 sets of leather armor. Mill's forge never stopped ringing. We were building strength as fast as we could, because somewhere in the deep ocean to the east, that serpent was still growing, still hunting, and sooner or later, its shadow would reach us too. This was my 7th time flying on Thunderhawk, and I was finally getting comfortable. I didn't need to press flat against its back anymore. I could even free up a hand to adjust the knee pads Mill had made from Ironback wolf hide. The wind at 100 meters was brutal, but the custom saddle helped. Weiss was watching from the tower with his brass telescope, calling out warnings. When the wind shifted suddenly, Thunderhawk's tail feathers started shaking. But before I could react, the eagle let out a cry. Blue light glowed along its wings, and it rolled smoothly with the current, handling the turbulence on its own. Smart bird. I was about to practice diving maneuvers when Thunderhawk suddenly locked its eyes westward toward the Tana Mountains. Something was wrong. Black dust clouds rose from a snow valley below, mixed with the sounds of metal clashing and beasts roaring. I pulled the reins. Thunderhawk dove like an arrow. Below us, 12 sleds marked with a thorny shield crest were circled up in a defensive ring. About 30 guards from a Thorntown trading caravan were surrounded by nearly 50 wolves. The worst was the pack leader, an Iron Mane Wolf King, a mid-level magical beast standing 2 meters at the shoulder, its metal-like mane gleaming in the sunlight. Every time it lunged, the guard's shields groaned under the impact. The lead merchant was bleeding badly, cornered against a sled by 3 wolves. The Wolf King's green eyes were fixed on a sealed sled in the center. Something inside smelled valuable, some kind of rare plant. I gave the order. Thunderhawk, go. The eagle spread its 6-meter wings and formed 6 transparent wind blades between them. They sliced through the front line of wolves like spinning razors, cutting 8 in half instantly. But the Wolf King just shook its mane. The wind blades only sparked against its body, making it angrier. It roared so loud my ears rang, then launched itself straight up at us. Black mist poured from its jaws, thick with the stench of blood, slowing Thunderhawk's wings for half a second. But Thunderhawk didn't flinch. It folded its wings and dove to meet the wolf head-on. At the last moment, 3 feet from the Wolf King's fangs, the eagle twisted sideways and slammed its electrified right wing into the beast's ribs. The crack of breaking bones echoed across the valley. The Wolf King flew sideways and smashed through 2 sleds. When it struggled to its feet, half its metal mane was scorched black, raw flesh exposed underneath. I was amazed at the gap in power. Thunderhawk was peak mid-level, and against a regular mid-level beast, it was total domination. The Wolf King saw it too. Fear flashed in its green eyes, and it turned to run. Thunderhawk's claws shot out and grabbed it by the back of the neck, lifting the 100-pound beast clean off the ground. The guards below recognized me and started clearing the remaining wolves. The Wolf King thrashed wildly in Thunderhawk's grip. I waited for the right moment, drew my sword from the saddle pouch, and shouted the command to drop. Thunderhawk hurled the beast into the snow. I leaped from the eagle's back as it dove, wind chi blazing along my blade in brilliant green light. Gale thrust, spine break. My sword pierced the exact junction between the Wolf King's spine and skull. It let out one last whimper, twitched, and went still. A green magic core rolled from its shattered head, faintly marked with lightning patterns. The Thorntown merchant, Mel, scrambled over on his hands and knees, his expensive fur coat torn to shreds. He thanked me over and over, saying his whole caravan would have been wolf food without me. I told him not to worry. Thorntown and Eagletown had always been good neighbors. He explained the Wolf King had appeared 3 months ago and already attacked for caravans. His team had been transporting dusk shadow grass, a rare herb, with 7 junior knight escorts, thinking they'd be safe. They lost 3 guards before I arrived. As thanks, he offered me 3 crates of the herb. I thought of Lisa complaining about running low on ingredients for healing salves and gladly accepted. Then Barso mentioned something that wiped the smile off my face. His scouts had found strange tracks on the western side of the mountain range, giant reptilian footprints, each claw mark 3 feet wide. 3 feet wide. That wasn't a mid-level beast. That was something at the advanced level. I stared at the distant mountains, my mood darkening fast. To the east, Seaview Town was dealing with the sea serpent. Now to the west, something even bigger might be lurking near our borders. I looked at the wolf carcasses scattered across the snow. Let's go. Send word to Lucas to bring a team out here for cleanup. Thunderhawk let out a proud cry, spread its wings, and launched us skyward. The downdraft erased the wolf tracks in the snow below. But at the border between our territory and Thorntown's land, a trail of massive footprints stretched toward Eagletown. Each print sank half a meter deep into the frozen ground. This winter was going to be harder than I thought. Down in the Black Rock Village mine, things were running full speed. Dustbark and his kobolds had pushed the tunnels nearly 100 meters deep in just 1 month, and the ore stockpile at the entrance had grown into a small mountain. Daniel reported the numbers: 712 standard ingots this month, worth at least 3 gold coins each at market price, over 2,100 gold total. The camel bull herd was producing well too. 88 adults, 19 calves, 10 more rented out to neighboring towns. Weiss listed the winter output: 6,000 liters of milk, 1,500 pounds of wool and horn. But as I'd ordered, all of it stayed in storage. The camel bull supplies were our lifeline, not trading stock. I brushed the mineral dust off my hands and made the call. I told them to send word to Baru Nora immediately. We needed to form a trading caravan and get these black rock ingots to market before the blizzards sealed the mountain passes. Baru had barely been back from his last trip, but there was no time to rest. When I arrived at the gathering point, he already had the caravan ready: 20 camel bulls, 40 guards, everything loaded up. Each ingot weighed 100 pounds, requiring special racks on the camel bulls' backs. Mill had even forged lead-lined pouches to keep moisture-sensitive medicines dry during transport. The guards were kitted out in new black rock armor under Rashid's command, eagle crests polished bright on their shields. Under the oiled tarps, the dark glow of the ingots peeked through. Everything we had to trade for survival. I told Baru the destination: Latte City, Earl Rep's direct territory. He looked stunned. Latte City's tariffs were 50% higher than Thorntown's. But I explained the logic. Seaview Town's sea routes were blocked by the serpent. The Western Mountain Pass had signs of an advanced-level beast. The only safe option was south, Latte City, which had the continent's largest winter grain market and was backed by the Earl's granaries. I gave Baru 2 gold coins stamped with the eagle crest as his special authorization. Sell the ingots for no less than 3 gold each, but don't hesitate to spend everything on winter wheat and healing herbs. We needed food that would keep our people alive, not coins sitting in a vault. Baru swore he'd return before the first real blizzard hit. I apologized for sending him out again so soon, but winter had come early and we were racing against time. I watched the caravan disappear from the tower, Thunderhawk circling overhead as escort. Snow was falling steadily. My stomach was tight with worry. Our grain reserves had been calculated before 500 extra mouths arrived, and this winter was colder and earlier than usual. Then Lucas brought more trouble. A spy's message from Seaview Town: Baron Nash was forcibly recruiting fishermen to build anti-serpent warships, planning to fight the sea monster before the blizzards arrived. I doubted he had any real chance. But the sea serpent wasn't my biggest concern. Our coast was far from the creature, and Seaview Town stood between us and the ocean. The real danger was to the west. That advanced-level beast, whose 3-foot-wide tracks Barso had spotted, I tossed the spy's message tube into the fire and sent orders to Mill. Arm every remaining soldier as fast as possible. We had 80 guards without armor, and our reserves were down to 20%. I told them to increase mining speed and add more workers. That night, Thunderhawk brought me another scale, dark green this time, covered in serrated edges and hot to the touch, coated in black slime. Much worse than the sea serpent scales from before. Whatever was lurking to the west, it was getting closer. I crushed the scale in my hand and watched the slime dissolve into black vapor. I ordered Lucas to double the night patrols starting immediately. At the forge, Mill worked through the night without stopping. His hammer rang against the last batches of ore, turning them into armor as fast as he could. And somewhere on the road to Latte City, Rashid's caravan was pushing through the snow under heavy gray clouds. Behind a snow hill 50 paces from the convoy, 30 pairs of green wolf eyes flickered in the storm, waiting. This winter was not going to be peaceful. The caravan ran into trouble on the road to Latte City. Rashid spotted them first, snow wolves, more cold-resistant than the ironback wolves he'd fought before. 30 pairs of green eyes watching from behind a snow hill. Something was wrong, though. Snow wolves don't normally attack caravans before a blizzard. Something bigger was driving them. Then it came out. An Ice Ridge Wolf King, a peak mid-level magical beast the size of a warhorse, white-furred with bone spikes along its spine that gleamed like frozen blades. Worse than the Ironmane Wolf King I'd killed with Thunderhawk. Rashid ordered Baru to pull the camel bulls southeast toward a pine forest for cover while he and the guards held the line. He unleashed his flowing firestorm, igniting 7 wolves instantly. But the Wolf King raised an ice shield right out of the ground and blocked the attack cold. Ice element beast against fire element knight. His advantage was cut down. The wolves surrounded them in the trees. Baru cracked open the medicine crates and handed out cold resistance potions, warming the soldiers' frozen hands back to life. Rashid ordered everyone to focus fire on the Wolf King. 40 guards thrust their black rock spears in unison, but the Wolf King raised an ice wall from the earth and blocked them. Wolves flanked from both sides, clawing deep gouges into the pine trees. Rashid fired a black rock arrowhead through the ice wall and hit the Wolf King's paw, then charged in and stabbed at its unprotected belly. The beast's ice-covered tail smashed his shield apart and sent him flying. His armor cracked like a spiderweb. The wolves broke through the line and rushed the camel bulls. Baru grabbed a short axe and stood in front of a young calf, cutting down several wolves before one slammed into him and broke his ribs. He coughed up blood but kept fighting. In that desperate moment, Rashid forced himself up and poured his last healing potion onto his sword blade. The medicine reacted with his flowing fire chi, and the sword erupted in blue flames. He rolled past the Wolf King's lunge and slashed the back of its knee joint. Blue fire spread across the ice on its body, melting and burning. The beast collapsed in agony, and for the first time, fear showed in its green eyes. Rashid drove his sword through its skull. The magic core melted on impact. Without their leader, the remaining wolves scattered into the blizzard. 3 guards died. 5 were badly wounded. Baru's injuries were lighter thanks to his knight apprentice constitution. Rashid remembered what I'd told him before they left. Bring back enough food, but more importantly, bring back everyone. He'd lost 3. That weighed on him. He ordered everything useful collected, the Wolf King's body, intact snow wolf pelts, even the broken bones. Baru managed a pained smile, noting the extra goods would fetch money in Latte City. 2 days later they reached Frostblade Town, the last free market before entering the Earl's territory. Baru traded the Wolf King's magic core and intact pelts to a rare pharmacist for a small bag of winter wheat grass seeds, a plant that only sprouts in cold water during winter, and 10 sealed glass tubes of half-finished blood-clotting salve. The wolf materials weren't quite enough for the full product, so they got the unfinished version. Baru winced at the cost, but made the call on his own. Rare medicinal seeds were too valuable to pass up. 3 more days of hard travel brought them to Latte City's north gate. The guards stared at their blood-soaked armor and battered shields. Baru handed over Eagle Town's authorization papers and croaked out that they were here for winter grain. The winter market was everything I'd promised. Enormous vaulted warehouses filled with golden mountains of wheat, barrels of salted meat, rows of medicine stalls. Baru sold every black rock ingot at 3 gold coins each, then poured everything into supplies. 300 carts of winter wheat, 50 barrels of salted meat, 20 crates of healing herbs, and 10 crates of strong liquor. He traded the leftover wolf bones and damaged pelts for 20 bags of pasture grass seeds. Rashid surprised everyone by trading the Wolf King's skull for permafrost moss seeds, a plant that purifies water and keeps it perpetually cold. He'd noticed Baru buying the winter wake seeds and figured more rare seeds couldn't hurt. Baru laughed and told Rashid he had the instincts of a merchant. With the supplies loaded and a blizzard threatening, they headed home immediately. As they left the city, Rashid looked back at Latte City's walls and said something that made it back to me later. Eagle Town will have its own city walls someday. I was proud of both of them. They'd bled for those supplies, and every sack of wheat they carried meant another life saved through winter. A spy's message arrived by carrier pigeon, and the news was worse than I imagined. Baron Nash had finally made his move against the sea serpent. He'd converted 2 merchant ships into battle vessels and sailed out with his forces. But he hadn't gone alone. He'd paid a heavy price to hire Viscount Morin Dark from Kenlon Town, a high-level knight who specialized in water element chi. 3 warships flew the Kenlon whale flag alongside Nash's sea anchor banners. It didn't matter. The sea serpent was an awakened-level magical beast, equal to a great earth knight in human terms, far beyond what anyone expected. When it burst from the black water, its body was covered in sea blue scales, and its forked tongue was as long as a ship's mast. Venom dripped from the tongue's tip, corroding the ocean into white foam. I noticed from the report that one of its head scales was missing, exposing a raw wound underneath. It had fought something else before and survived. Nash and Morin attacked together. Nash's silver sword chi crashed against the serpent's eye socket while Morin formed a massive water trident aimed at its throat. Neither did more than scratch the scales. The serpent's tail, dozens of meters long, smashed one warship to splinters in a single swipe. Its venom rained down on the deck and dissolved soldiers into nothing. The steel cables from their special harpoons wrapped around the serpent's body but snapped like thread. Then it dove straight at Nash's flagship, jaws wide open. Both knights leaped and slashed at its mouth together. Their combined attack only left white marks on the scales. The ship exploded on impact. Nash and Morin were thrown through the air, their armor eaten away by acid. Nash screamed the retreat. The serpent didn't chase. It just stared at the surviving ships with hateful eyes, then sank back into the poisoned sea. I burned the message after reading it. An awakened-level beast. That explained everything. Then something else clicked in my mind. Nash was a high-level knight. He'd been hiding that strength all along. That's why he dared to cheat my father with moldy grain a year ago. My father was a high-level knight too, and Nash must have known he could match him if it came to a fight. He'd been playing weak this entire time, only revealing his true power because the serpent forced his hand. Nash was far more dangerous and cunning than I'd realized. But I didn't have time to dwell on Seaview Town's problems. Thunderhawk flew in through my window carrying another dark green scale, serrated edges, still radiating heat. The same kind of scale it had been finding from the western mountains. I climbed onto Thunderhawk's back and flew toward the northern foothills of the Tana Mountains. Below us, massive footprints stretched across the snow, each one half a meter deep. The snow around them had melted from intense heat, leaving charred black earth exposed. Fire element, the exact opposite of the sea serpent's water and poison. Thunderhawk dove and clawed a piece of fur from beneath the snow, bright red, smelling of sulfur. We followed the trail over 3 mountain ridges until it disappeared into a canyon. The rock at the bottom had been melted into glass by extreme heat. Thunderhawk dropped lower, and through the rising steam of a hot spring, I saw it. A flame-breath giant lizard. An advanced-level magical beast, over 10 meters long, covered in dark green scales with burning embers still glowing between the spikes on its back. Red toxic breath pulsed from its jaws, scorching the surrounding snow into blackened earth. These creatures are supposed to stay deep inside the Tana Mountains. Why had it moved so close to Eagle Town? The lizard sensed us. Its eyes snapped open, literal flames burned in them, and it spat a jet of red fire that grazed Thunderhawk's wing and blasted a massive hole in the cliff wall behind us. I pulled Thunderhawk up immediately. We got out of there fast. The lizard didn't follow. It just glared at the sky, then settled back down and closed its eyes, embers fading between its spines. On the flight home, I looked east toward Seaview Town's dark clouds, then back at the mountains hiding the giant lizard. My heart was heavy. The sea serpent was an awakened-level monster terrorizing the coast. The flame lizard was an advanced-level beast creeping closer to my territory. Seaview Town had already been devastated. Would Eagle Town be next? When I landed at Eagle Fort, I could see Seaview Town's battered ships limping into their frozen harbor in the distance. Nash stood on the docks, staring out at the deep water with an unreadable expression. And in the mountain valley behind me, the flame-breathed giant lizard opened its burning eyes once more, looking north, straight toward Eagle Town. Eagle Town was preparing for war. On the training ground, Lucas was drilling the soldiers hard. He had them practice angled shield blocks. If the flame-breath lizard ever attacked, its fire would slide off tilted shields instead of pouring over flat ones. Charles led the crossbow team, training them to shoot upward at the gaps between the lizard's back spines. Their bolt tips were coated in ice bramble juice that Lisa had prepared, frosting over in the cold air. Along the town walls, Doug Downs and Benson Fells checked the new black rock fortifications. The kobolds had buried ice-veined stones in the wall foundations. If the lizard's flames hit them, the temperature would drop instantly. Sulfur powder was scattered in the snow around the perimeter as an early warning system. If the lizard got close, the sulfur would react. I went to Black Rock Village to watch Mill work. He tossed a flame lizard scale into his furnace. One Thunderhawk had collected, and the molten iron erupted. The fire patterns in the scale clashed with the wind element in the black rock, or throwing off blue-purple sparks. He was forging a breastplate for me, mixing in Iron Mane wolf blood for extra strength. He said it could withstand up to 3 blasts of fire breath. My first ranked suit of armor. I'd been waiting a long time for this. Then Thunderhawk cried out overhead, carrying a message tube from Baru. The caravan was 5 days out. Finally, I could breathe a little easier. But the best surprise came from the Camel Bull Ranch. Ellie Nora was bandaging a lame calf when the Silver-Mane Camel Bull King, our only magical beast-level camel bull, knelt down beside her and pressed its enormous head against her back. When she touched its forehead, something happened. A warm current flowed from her palm through her entire body. Her hair lifted without wind, and a pale silver chi wrapped around her arms like ribbons, glowing in the cold mist. She'd broken through to junior night, right there in the pasture. By the time I arrived, she was kneeling in the snow, gasping. The Camel Bull King stamped the ice around her protectively. I placed an Eagle Crest Knight badge in her hand and formally named her a Knight of Eagle Town. She knelt and swore loyalty with tears in her eyes. She and her brother Baru had grown up here. The old Baron had given her a breathing method years ago, and now it had finally paid off. Ice attribute, a perfect match for this winter. The soldiers cheered like thunder across the training field. Then I watched something remarkable. Lucas challenged Ellie to a sparring match. She climbed onto the Camel Bull King's back, and together they fought as one. The king sprayed ice mist that turned the ground into a mirror. Ellie's ice chi shaped the frozen shards into tiny blade formations. When Lucas tried to break through, the king's mane whipped out ice spikes while Ellie sent wind-guided ice daggers at his openings. The king roared, and a blast of ice blue chi from its mane froze Lucas's sword solid. Ellie's blade slipped through and tapped his shoulder plate. Lucas surrendered, laughing and shaking his head. The combination of knight and magical beast was incredibly hard to fight against. Ellie was only a fresh junior knight, but with the Camel Bull King, she could match Lucas blow for blow. She dismounted and stroked the king's sweating neck, feeling for the first time what it meant to fight in harmony with a beast partner, not through brute force, but through the shaping power of ice, forming an unbreakable defense in the rhythm of shared breath. That evening, Ellie rode the Camel Bull King on patrol along the western foothills. Thunderhawk was circling above with half a scorched scale in its claws, freshly shed by the flame lizard. She raced back to town to report. The lizard was getting closer. And at the same time, through the howling blizzard, Baru's caravan was pushing the final stretch home. He spotted Eagle Fort's lighthouse through the snow and shouted to Rashid. The camel bulls were hauling cart after cart of winter wheat, salted meat, spirits, and herbs. Rashid drew his sword, its blade humming in the wind, and urged everyone faster. The blizzard was closing in. Their tracks vanished behind them almost instantly, but they were almost home. The caravan came home through a wall of gray snow. Baru's shout cut through the wind as the first camel bulls crossed into Eagle Town, their breath freezing into white clouds. I stood at the entrance and watched the wheat carts roll over the stone road. The sound of grain sacks scraping together was the most comforting thing I'd heard in weeks. Weiss tallied it all up: 300 carts of winter wheat, 50 barrels of salted meat, 10 crates of liquor, plus the Ice Ridge Wolf King's blood for Mill's Forge. We were going to make it through winter. Baru handed me a sealed clay jar, winter wheatgrass seeds from the pharmacist in Frostblade Town. When I opened it, cold air mixed with cedar scent poured out. The brown seeds trembled at the bottom, covered in natural ice crystal patterns. Mill grabbed the jar and got excited immediately. He said the seeds were the main ingredient for frost potions, which could cool wounds and stop the flame lizard's toxic fire from spreading through flesh. But then he kicked open the herb crate and grumbled. Without a proper alchemist, a crucible, and a beginner's alchemy manual, we couldn't make real potions. Lisa's face turned red. She admitted she could only manage basic healing salves for now. I put my hand on her shoulder and told her the truth. Her ice bramble ointment had cut frostbite cases by 70%. That mattered more than any textbook. I took the eagle crest from my belt and placed it in her hands, naming her Eagle Town's official herbalist. I promised that when Baru's next caravan went to Latte City in spring, he'd bring back a beginner's alchemy manual for her. She squeezed the crest so tight her knuckles went white. Her voice caught in her throat. All those nights alone grinding herbs in the cold suddenly meant something. I made her smile before I left by mentioning that Mill had been secretly using her ice bramble juice to temper his forged steel and froze his own beard into an icicle doing it. 3 days later, the real blizzard hit. Temperatures dropped below -30. The sulfur warning lines we'd spread in the snow froze solid and stopped working. Doug Downs hammered at the cracked coils on the wall while his men cleared paths through the drifts. Ellie guided the camel bull herd into the stone barns, the Silvermane King smashing through ice at the doorway with its hooves. Every 2 hours, she counted heads. Not a single animal would be lost to the storm. At the granary, Lucas organized the food distribution. Free citizens lined up with copper coins or animal hides to buy their daily ration. Slaves showed their wooden tags and received 2 loaves of black rye bread each, the same size as everyone else's. I told Lucas to allow credit for anyone who couldn't pay. We'd settle it with labor after spring. No one in Eagle Town was going to starve. While I watched the lines, I overheard the townspeople talking. Old Hawk, a retired miner leaning on his cane, stared at his bread, twice as thick as last year's. He told the woman next to him that under the old lord, the grain carts used to roll right past their part of town without stopping. Now he got 2 loaves a day, mixed with Lisa's cold resistance herbs. A woman named Elisa, holding her baby wrapped in a new camel wool cloak with a tiny eagle crest stitched at the edge, pointed at the slave line. Their portions were the same as the free citizens. She said Baron Nash and Seaview Town treated his slaves like wolf food, but here things were different. A young guard named Tom glanced around nervously before whispering with a grin. He said he'd seen me patrolling the west wall the night before, ice hanging off my armor longer than his spear. He watched me give my own warming stone to a sick child, my lips turning blue from the cold. Hawk laughed and touched the cloak on his shoulders. Woven from camel wool mixed with strands of the Silvermane King's fur, faintly warm with chi. Last winter his roof leaked, and his family huddled by the fire afraid to sleep. This year I'd sent workers to reinforce every home and handed out moisture-blocking salt blocks. Elisa bounced her baby, its little face pink and warm inside the cloak. She mentioned Lisa grinding herbs in the warming shed, her husband eating hot soup every day at the Black Rock Village mine. Then her voice broke. Last winter, her neighbor Masha didn't make it. Tom pointed to the eagle flag snapping in the wind above the granary door. Someone had carefully patched its torn edges with animal hide. He told them not to worry. Rashid had buried 3 layers of warming stones under the granary floor, and even the meat barrels were sealed with black rock lids. These people didn't know what a flame breath lizard was. They'd never heard of awaken-level magical beasts, but they knew that when I handed the first loaf of bread to the weakest slave in the line, this winter became something different from the one that had killed their neighbors last year. And standing there in the howling snow, listening to them talk, I silently promised myself they were right. This winter would be different. Late one night, while I was studying the flame lizard's movement patterns on my map, Thunderhawk smashed through the window in a panic, ice falling from its feathers. Something was happening at the northern foothills. I jumped on its back and flew into the blizzard. Below us, a trail of dark red blood cut through the white snow like an open wound. We followed it to a sheltered hollow in the mountains. There, half buried in snow, lay a massive figure, a minotaur, over 2 meters tall. Its gray-brown fur was matted with dried blood. One horn snapped off at the base, still oozing black blood. Deep claw marks split its back down to the bone, the edges covered in frost crystals. Whatever attacked it had ice element power. It was a mid-level beastman, barely alive, but breathing. I called in the guards from Blackrock Village. Daniel, the village administrator, wanted the Minotaur killed immediately. He reminded me that beastmen and humans were enemies, and that historical records were full of orc armies raiding human towns. A mid-level beastman waking up in our village could be a disaster. I understood his fear, but I looked around at the kobold guards and at Mill standing there with his hammer, and I made my point. Blackrock Village thrived because of kobold miners and a dwarf blacksmith. They were different races too. If we could accept them, why not give this wounded minotaur a chance? And with Mill's strength plus our guards, we could handle any trouble if it came. Daniel tried to argue, but I cut him off. Different races can coexist. Besides, a minotaur appearing alone in human territory, wounded and desperate enough to cross the Tana Mountains, meant something had gone wrong on the Beastman Plains. I wanted to know what. We put the minotaur in a stone hut and sent for Lisa. She examined him quickly and said his heart was still beating, but ice energy had damaged too many of his meridians. He wouldn't wake up soon, but with careful treatment, he could survive. Then I pulled Dustbark aside. I needed him to do something important. I suspected trouble on the Beastman Plains, and I wanted intelligence. Dustbark was the perfect spy. He was a beastman himself, with junior-level strength, and he could use the hidden tunnel through Haunted Hollow to cross the mountains without anyone knowing. I looked him in the eye and reminded him that the tunnel was Eagle Town's most critical secret. If it was exposed, the consequences would be devastating. Dustbark knelt and swore on his honor as a kobold. He would let no one discover the passage. Mill grunted a warning from behind. The Beastman Plains were no playground, and even fellow beastmen wouldn't show mercy to a weak tribe member. Dustbark knew. He'd lived there long enough. But these months in Blackrock Village had been the most peaceful of his life. No worrying about food, no rival tribes trying to destroy his people, and all the mining work they could want. He could even feel his own strength growing, maybe close to mid-level soon. I gave him a healing potion Lisa had made, not ranked, but effective, and told him the mission was about gathering information, nothing more. Coming back alive mattered more than any intel. He took the potion carefully, knelt one last time, and walked into the mine tunnels toward the hidden passage. I watched him disappear into the dark. On the flight home, questions filled my head. Minotaurs hold high status among the Beastman tribes. They don't come near the border without reason, and they certainly don't cross the monster-infested Tana Mountains alone. Something had driven this one here. Something bad. The next morning, the blizzard eased slightly. Pale light leaked through cracks in the gray clouds. I stood at my window holding the sealed jar of winter wake grass seeds and felt a spark of hope despite everything. Winter wake grass only germinates in extreme cold and must grow underwater. The conditions right now were perfect, and I knew exactly the right place. Breeze Lake, south of the Camel Bull pasture. I flew there on Thunderhawk. The lake was frozen solid, its surface glowing faintly blue. I cut through the ice with my sword and scattered the seeds into the frigid water. Each seed sank immediately, settling on the lake bottom in a pattern like brown stars. Then I added the permafrost moss that Rashid had traded for in Latte City. The moment it touched water, it dissolved into fine silver threads that wrapped around every seed. The lake shuddered. Cold energy spread outward like a web, and the ice reformed above with a faint shimmer. Through the frozen surface, I watched the seeds crack open and sprout tiny crystal shoots. It worked. The permafrost moss would keep the lake cold year-round, even after winter ended. The moss and the grass would form a symbiotic cycle, a permanent growing environment. If the winter wake grass established itself, Eagle Town would have its own magical herb resource point. I smiled as I flew back. 3 small resource points: the Camel Bull herd, the Black Rock mine, and now potentially the herb lake. That's the kind of wealth some Viscounts had. Eagle Town was growing faster than I ever expected. The moment I'd been dreading arrived at the worst possible time, and the best. Mill had just finished my armor. I watched him pull it from the quenching pool, blue-purple steam rising around it. The breastplate was forged from flame lizard scales, black rock ore, and iron mane wolf king blood. Fire patterns and wind elements wove together across its surface, shimmering in the forge light. A ranked piece of equipment. Only initial grade, not mid-level, but the strongest thing Eagle Town could produce. I put it on. It fit perfectly, hugging my body without restricting movement. Every joint was carefully designed. I drew my sword and ran through a set of forms, feeling the armor sync with my chi. For the first time, I felt properly equipped for this world. Mill grumbled that if he'd had better materials, frost iron, advanced magic cores, he could have made mid-level armor. I told him we were a poor border town, not a great Earth Knight's estate. We'd make do with what we had. Then Thunderhawk screamed from the sky. Not its normal cry. This was sharp, urgent, full of warning. Sulfur clung to its feathers when it landed. My blood went cold. The flame breath lizard was moving toward Black Rock Village. I flew out on Thunderhawk and saw it through the blizzard. A massive dark red shape plowing through the snow, melting everything in its path, steam billowing around it like a walking volcano. The spikes on its back glowed angry red. I understood immediately. Black Rock Village never stopped its forges, even in winter. The heat from the furnaces and the energy from, or smelting, must have drawn the lizard through the frozen mountains like a beacon. A fire element beast, uncomfortable in the cold, drawn to the one source of warmth for miles. I raced back and called everyone together. The flame lizard is heading for Black Rock Village. We stop it before it gets there. The room went silent. Lisa nearly dropped her medicine jar, her knuckles white. She whispered what everyone was thinking. Could we really stop an advanced-level magical beast? Mill kicked over an iron stool so hard the floor shook. I'll fight the damn thing alone if I have to. Stop whining like you've never seen blood. Rashid knelt and volunteered as vanguard. His eyes burned with the look of a man ready to die for his lord. He said serving me was the honor of his lifetime. Lucas gripped his sword and said the lizard's scales were nearly impenetrable, but even glancing blows could slow it down. I laid out the plan. Lucas would take the crossbow teams to high ground on both flanks, every bolt coated in Lisa's ice bramble juice. Rashid would lead soldiers head-on to lure the beast into our trap zone, but no prolonged fighting, just bait and retreat. Ellie would ride the Silvermane Camel Bull King as mobile support, harassing from the sides. Everyone moved. Outside Black Rock Village, soldiers dug pits in the blizzard and planted poisoned black rock spikes at the bottom, covered with thin snow for camouflage. Lucas positioned his crossbow teams on the slopes, bolts glowing pale blue. Ellie patrolled the perimeter on the Camel Bull King. At the narrow canyon outside Haunted Hollow, Baru directed men to chain massive boulders to the cliff walls on both sides. When the lizard entered the canyon, they'd release the chains. Even if the rocks couldn't wound it, they'd slow it down. Mill marched up with his war hammer over his shoulder, followed by a dozen kobolds carrying armfuls of short spears. With Dustbark gone on his scouting mission, Mill had organized the kobolds himself. He pointed out that their physical abilities were better than regular soldiers. Lisa and her assistants worked frantically in a makeshift herb tent, boiling more ice bramble juice and numbing salves. White steam mixed with the smell of herbs and sulfur drifted into the storm. By nightfall, every trap was set. The battlefield was silent except for the howling wind. I stood on the watchtower in my new armor, its blue glow catching the moonlight. In the distance, through the curtain of snow, the lizard's red glow was growing brighter, closer. I gripped my sword. This was going to be the hardest fight of my life. An advanced-level magical beast against a mid-level knight, a peak mid-level dwarf warrior. and a town full of soldiers who had never faced anything like this. But we had no choice. Behind us was everything we'd built: Black Rock Village, the mine, the people. Running wasn't an option. The red light grew closer. The ground began to tremble. The battle was about to begin. The air turned thick with sulfur and the stench of rotting meat. The flame-breath lizard came through the blizzard like a living volcano, fire sparking off its back spines, melting everything in its path. Its blood-red slit eyes locked onto the forge's direction. Every rumble from its throat shook the snow off the ground. "Everybody hide!" Dug Down screamed, waving his signal flag. 30 soldiers pulled the ropes buried underground. The lizard's front claws stepped onto our disguised snow slope, and the ice shattered. It plunged into a pit 3 meters deep, lined with 1,000 poisoned black rock spikes. The beast roared so loud the night sky seemed to crack. Spikes pierced its front legs. Our toxic coating hissed against its scales, sending up green smoke. But this creature's healing was beyond anything I'd imagined. It thrashed its head and ripped the entire trap wall out of the ground, sending rocks flying everywhere. Soldiers scrambled for cover. Charles triggered the boulder chains from the cliff above. Massive black rock stones slammed into the lizard's back like meteors. The impact blew snow 10 meters into the air, but the boulders only left white scratches on its armor. Those scales were harder than anything our soldiers wore. From my watchtower, I watched the lizard pull free from the pit. Its left front leg was eaten down to white bone by the poison, but muscle was already regrowing before my eyes. "Rashid, draw it into the valley." Rashid blazed into the fight, his fire chi burning along his armor like a red comet. He swung at the lizard's right eye. His sword bounced off the scales with a shower of sparks, the recoil numbing his arm. The beast swiped at him. He flipped midair and raised a chi shield that barely held. 3 black claw marks burned into it, the metal edges melting. Mill burst from cover, his warhammer crashing into the lizard's ankle with the full fury of his dwarven bloodline. The beast actually stumbled, but its tail whipped around and slammed Mill backward 5 steps, cracking the black rock ground under his boots. Blood seeped from his hands. Thunderhawk dove from above, wind and lightning chi spiraling into an energy lance between its claws. It struck the lizard's throat, the thinnest scales, and ripped 3 gashes down to the bone. Dark green blood sprayed out, steaming with sulfur. The lizard screamed and blasted a wall of toxic fire 100 meters wide into the sky. Thunderhawk twisted but caught the edge on its left wing. Feathers burned instantly. My eagle shrieked in pain and spiraled toward the ground. My vision went red. I leaped from the watchtower, wind chi exploding from my body. My sword sent a storm of wind blades at the lizard's eyes, forcing them shut. Rashid charged in and drove his blade into the gap between its eyelids, pumping fire chi through the sword. The beast went berserk, slamming him into the mountainside hard enough to crack the rock face. "Ellie, ice fog. Lucas, crossbow barrage." I screamed the orders while my chi formed a barrier around my armor. The lizard's tail caught me full force. The impact launched me several meters into a boulder. I barely kept my feet. The fire patterns on my new armor flickered from the damage. Ellie rode the Silvermane Camel Bull King into the fight, spinning ice chi into a dense white fog that swallowed the lizard whole. Lucas and his crossbow teams fired from both cliffs. Ice bramble bolts rained down like locusts. They couldn't penetrate the scales, but the frost effect slowed the beast's movements, every claw swipe trailing ice crystals. The lizard roared inside the fog and spat a pillar of toxic flame straight at Ellie. The Camel Bull King reared up and took the blast on its thick fur. Its back burned black, and it screamed in agony. Ellie rolled off just in time, forming an ice ramp with her chi to slide clear of the fire's path. Mill led the kobolds in a flanking charge. A dozen short spears stabbed the lizard's belly where the scales were thinnest, sinking several inches deep. Green blood gushed out and burned the kobold's skin on contact. The lizard crushed forward. One kobold was caught under its claw and killed instantly, smashed flat. Mill roared and hammered the beast's knee, forcing it back half a step. I seized the moment. Every drop of wind chi I had left poured into my sword. I launched a wind blade several meters long straight into the wound on its front leg. This time it cut deep. Tendons snapped with a sound I could hear clearly. The lizard staggered backward, crashing through boulders. Then silence. Just the blizzard howling and the beast's ragged breathing. I leaned on my sword, looking at the dents covering my armor. Half my chi was spent. Rashid's arm hung wrong, his armor scorched. Mill knelt on one knee, a crack running through his warhammer's head. Thunderhawk lay in the snow, its burned wings still smoking, exhaustion dulling its golden eyes. The lizard was wounded, front leg crippled, throat slashed, eyelid cut, but it was still standing. And in its crimson eyes, I saw something worse than pain. Rage. It stamped the ground. Cracks split the earth, and burning breath seeped from below, vaporizing the snow around it. My heart sank. We'd hit it with everything we had, and it was still fighting. Worse, we'd made it truly angry. The real killing hadn't even started yet. Black Rock Village's lights flickered through the storm behind us. This battle for Eagle Town's survival had just entered its cruelest phase. The lizard was done holding back. It roared so loud the sound hit us like a physical force. My ears screamed, and windows shattered in Black Rock Village behind us. Its tail smashed the ground, and the entire valley shook. I threw up a windshield, but the shockwave blew right through it. My boots carved furrows in the frozen earth as I was pushed back several meters. The fire patterns on my new armor faded to almost nothing. Rashid charged again, one arm barely working, fire chi blazing along his sword in a red streak aimed at the lizard's throat. But the beast was too fast. Its claws swept across like a giant scythe, forcing Rashid to redirect mid-strike. The impact flung him into the cliff wall. He coughed blood. His armor was falling apart. Mill wiped blood from his mouth, gripped his cracking warhammer, and led the remaining kobolds in from the other side. Dwarven honor will not be trampled, he roared, leaping at the lizard's hind leg while the kobolds rained spears into its belly. The beast spat a jet of toxic fire straight down at Mill. He blocked with his hammer. The metal shrieked and hissed under the flames, but being a ranked weapon, it held. Barely. Thunderhawk forced itself back into the air on its burned wing, eyes full of fury. It formed an even brighter energy lance between its claws and dove at the lizard's face. The beast swung its claw and slashed Thunderhawk's belly, drawing blood. But my eagle drove its talons through one of the lizard's eyes, blinding it on that side. The lizard went berserk. It thrashed wildly, smashing rocks and trees in every direction. Lucas kept his crossbow teams firing nonstop. Most bolts bounced off the scales, but the ice bramble coating was finally building up, making the beast slower and stiffer with every volley. Ellie circled on the Camel Bull King, pouring out ice fog and wind blades, keeping the lizard confused and pinned. I looked at my people, battered, bleeding, running on nothing but willpower. I'd underestimated what a high-level magical beast could do, even wounded and fighting in a blizzard that should have weakened it. If this kept going, we'd all die here. Then I saw it. When the lizard twisted in rage, the scales on its belly separated for just a moment, a gap in the armor. Everyone, the belly, that's the weak point, I screamed with everything I had. Hope came back into their eyes. Rashid dragged himself up. Fire chi erupted across his entire body until he looked like a living flame, and he hurled himself at the lizard's underside. Mill poured every last drop of dwarven fury into his hammer. Thunderhawk shrieked and dove alongside me. The lizard sensed what we were doing and thrashed to keep us away. But Lucas concentrated all crossbow fire on its head, and Ellie pushed her ice fog and wind blades to maximum power, locking the beast in place just long enough. Rashid's sword found the gap first. Fire chi flooded through the opening like a river. The lizard screamed and bucked. Then Mill's hammer crashed into the same wound with a sound like thunder, punching a massive hole through the belly armor. My wind blade and Thunderhawk's energy lance struck right after, tearing the wound wide open. Green blood erupted like a fountain. The flame breath lizard let out one final roar that shook the mountains. Its enormous body swayed once, twice, then crashed to the earth. Snow and rubble exploded outward. The ground trembled, then went still. Silence. Nothing but our ragged breathing and the howling wind. I collapsed onto the snow, staring at the pale light of dawn breaking through the clouds. It was over. We'd won. Black Rock Village was safe. Eagle Town was safe. Lisa rushed in with her apprentices, medicine boxes rattling. She knelt beside Thunderhawk, hands shaking as she touched its scorched wing, tears filling her eyes. Other medics spread across the battlefield, cleaning wounds and applying salves to the injured. Rashid sat against the cliff wall while Lisa bandaged his arm. He watched Mills silently polishing his cracked hammer in the distance and muttered, "I really did give everything this time." I forced myself to stand. My armor's glow was completely gone. I walked to the lizard's body. It filled half the valley. Its spiked back was shattered, scales cracked and dented, green blood frozen in pools that gleamed strangely in the first sunlight. The stench of sulfur and rot was overwhelming. I cut into its throat and pulled out a magic core glowing red, proof of an advanced magical beast kill and priceless material for forging stronger equipment. Collect every scale, every claw, every piece, I told the soldiers gathering around. Mill will give them new life. I started cutting scales myself despite the pain in my arms. We'd earned every piece of this creature. Lucas quietly directed soldiers to carry our fallen companions away, covering each body with white cloth. We'd lost people today. That weight settled on my shoulders alongside the relief. Ellie kept patrolling on the Camel Bull King, she alert, watching for any other threats. When the first golden rays of sunlight hit the battlefield, it lit up the destruction around us. The craters, the blood, the broken rocks. But looking at my people standing in that light, battered and exhausted but alive, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pride. The morning after the battle, I leaned against the cracked watchtower, my battered armor creaking in the wind. Soldiers were still cleaning up the battlefield below. Daniel rushed in with the casualty report. 17 lightly wounded, 5 seriously hurt, 3 soldiers, and 1 kobold killed. For taking down an advanced magical beast, the cost was remarkably low. But when I closed my eyes, I saw Rashid coughing blood, Thunderhawk's scorched wing, Mill's cracked hammer. Every loss mattered. I gave my orders. Lisa would prioritize the critical cases, the fallen soldiers' families would receive compensation, and the lizard's scales, claws, and magic core would be sealed and delivered to Mill. Then the alarm horn screamed from the watchtower. A bloodied figure stumbled out of the hidden tunnel in Haunted Hollow. It was Dustbark. He looked like death, a wound running from his left shoulder to his waist, bones showing through, his fur covered in strange purple slime that stank of rot. He collapsed at my feet and delivered the worst possible news. On the eastern side of the Tana Mountains, an entrance to the underground world had opened. Dark creatures were pouring out of the earth like a black flood, overrunning everything. Rockmane bears, bloodhorn bulls, entire beastman tribes. The Redfang orc clan had been torn to pieces. The room went dead silent. Daniel's scroll slipped from his hands. According to Kingdom records, the underground world is a parasitic microdimension attached to the ring continent. Its entrances appear randomly. Once one opens, cave creatures and dark beings spread like plague. Each underground world has a heart of the Undercity. Destroy it, and the whole dimension collapses. But until then, the creatures devour everything living in their path. I suddenly remembered, 2 months ago, Earl Rep had sent a conscription order because an underground passage had appeared near Tulip Fortress. That's where I'd sent Philip. Now another entrance had opened, this time right across the mountains from us. Dustbark explained that the entrance had appeared in a valley full of flames sun grass, a place rich with fire element energy. It had probably been a powerful beast's den before the underground creatures took over. Everything clicked. That's why the flame breath lizard had crossed the mountains. It wasn't hunting, it was fleeing. Something in the underground world had driven a high-level magical beast out of its own territory. Whatever was down there was strong enough to scare off a creature that nearly killed us all. Mills smashed his hammer into the floor and roared that he wasn't afraid of anything that lived in the dark. But Rashid was more cautious. He pointed out that the lizard had escaped alive, meaning the underground creatures were dangerous but not invincible. More importantly, the entrance was on the far side of the mountains, in Beastman territory. The mountain range itself and all its resident monsters formed a natural barrier between us and the threat. I agreed. The ones who should be worried right now were the Beastman tribes living near that entrance, not us. I considered reporting this to Earl Rep, but decided against it. The entrance wasn't on human territory, and I couldn't explain how I'd gotten the intelligence without revealing the secret tunnel through the mountains, a strategic asset far too valuable to share with anyone. I made my decisions quickly. Dustbark would station guards at the mountain tunnel permanently. Any sign of movement toward our side would be reported immediately. Daniel would issue a recruitment order. Eagletown needed to expand to 12 full squads. Every new recruit would undergo harsh training starting now. The days that followed were intense. Mill's forge burned around the clock, melting down the flame lizard scales into new weapons and armor. He handpicked 20 soldiers and formed 2 new squads under his direct command to guard Blackrock Village. "We'll defend this place tighter than my forge," he barked at them, hoisting his repaired warhammer. The black coating had been burned away in the fight, revealing the raw metal underneath. Lucas drilled 5 squads on the training ground daily. Shield formations, rapid reactions, counter-ambush tactics. These 5 squads were the garrison, Eagletown's last line of defense. Rashid's injuries healed the slowest. Lisa spent hours in his tent every day. But even flat on his back, he was sketching tactical plans on parchment with charcoal. He told me that once he recovered, the monsters at the foot of the Tana Mountains would become our whetstones. Only through constant battle would we truly grow stronger. Charles and the other squad leaders kept the hunting teams training hard, waiting for Rashid to heal so they could push back into the mountains. The underground world was out there, growing, spreading. For now the mountains kept it at bay. But I knew, walls don't last forever. The morning after the lizard battle, the countdown hit 0 again. My 4th card draw. When the card appeared, I stared at it in disbelief. The image showed a tiny snow-white sprite, no bigger than my palm, dancing happily among swirling snowflakes against a vast frozen plain. The cold seemed to seep right through the card itself. I'd never expected to draw an elemental being. I materialized it without hesitation. The card burst into light, and when it faded, a small snow spirit hovered in front of me. She had translucent wings like sculpted ice crystals, scattering tiny snowflakes with every flutter. Round sparkling eyes, a pink little nose, pale blue curly hair pinned with 2 snowflake clips. She was absurdly cute. She made a soft chirping sound, flew straight to my shoulder, grabbed my earlobe with her fuzzy little paws, and rubbed her head against my cheek. Her breath was cool and refreshing. But beneath that adorable appearance, I could sense her power, peak mid-level, and as an elemental spirit, she was a spellcaster. That made her far stronger in practice than any knight of the same rank. "Where did you come from, little one?" I asked, reaching to pat her head. She dodged playfully, circled me in the air, leaving a trail of silver laughter, then dive-bombed straight into my collar. Her icy little body made me shiver. "I'll call you Snowpuff." She poked her head out from my collar, eyes gleaming with delight, and kissed my cheek, leaving a cool spot on my skin. Snowpuff became Eagletown's mascot overnight. Aunt Bev, our cook, fell in love first. The moment she brought out fresh honey pancakes, Snowpuff chirped excitedly and circled the plate. Bev broke off a piece, and the little sprite sat on the plate's edge, swinging her tiny legs, nibbling happily, making satisfied chirping sounds, and blowing Bev a kiss with her cream-covered paws. After that, Snowpuff showed up at the kitchen every morning, tapping Bev's apron with her wings, begging for treats. Steward Weiss became her favorite ride. This normally stern old man couldn't resist her. Snowpuff loved sitting on top of his head, humming tuneless songs, swinging her legs, and occasionally flapping her wings to sprinkle tiny snowflakes into his silver hair. One day, Weiss was reporting to me about the blizzard. Buildings were at risk of collapsing, and he'd sent crews to reinforce them. He worried the storm might last too long. Right in the middle of his report, Snowpuff flew in through the window, landed on his head, and pushed his glasses down to the tip of his nose. The look on his face, helpless but completely charmed, lifted my mood instantly. But then I looked out the window. The storm was brutal. Wind-driven snow slashed at everything like blades. Rooftops sagged under the weight. Several wooden houses looked ready to cave in. Snowpuff noticed my worry. Her playful expression turned serious. She flew to the window, raised her tiny hand, and her pale blue hair began to glow with magical energy. What happened next was impossible. The raging blizzard around Eagletown suddenly calmed. The snowflakes stopped swirling randomly and began flowing in one direction, as if answering a command. Snow lifted off the ground on its own, pulling away from rooftops, streets, and buildings streaming toward the town's outer edge. Weiss snatched his glasses off in shock. I rushed to the window. Within minutes, a massive snow wall rose around the entire perimeter of Eagle Town, over 2 people tall, packed solid, blocking the howling wind completely. The trees that had been bending nearly to the ground went still. The buildings stopped groaning. Snowpuff had just shielded the entire town with ice magic. I clenched my fist with excitement. I never imagined her power could work on this scale. That one spell might have saved lives and buildings that would have been lost tonight. Snowpuff flew back to me looking flushed and tired, burrowed into my arms, and chirped softly, clearly fishing for praise. I held her gently in my palms and stroked her little head. Snowpuff, you're incredible. Without you, I don't know how much we would have struggled against this storm. She perked right up, eyes sparkling, launched into the air, did a little spin, and showered me and Weiss with glittering snowflakes that dissolved into starlight on our shoulders. Weiss smiled, the wrinkles on his face relaxing for the first time in days. It seems we've found our greatest blizzard guardian, my lord. He was right. In a world of swords and monsters, my most powerful winter weapon turned out to be a palm-sized sprite with a sweet tooth and a habit of sitting on old men's heads. 3 days after Snowpuff's snow wall saved the town, I was staring at 2 winter wake grass seedlings in a clay pot on my desk. They'd sprouted after I planted them in Breeze Lake, but then just stopped growing. Lisa had checked them several times and couldn't figure out why. I was starting to accept that growing magical herbs wasn't as simple as dropping seeds in cold water. Then Snowpuff zipped through the window and hovered over the pot, her little nose almost touching the yellowed leaves. She tilted her head, blinked at me, and I suddenly had an idea. Snowpuff, could you try your magic on these? She chirped happily, flipped in the air, and dove into the pot. Her tiny fingers touched the tip of a seedling, and instantly, cold mist rose from the water. The drooping leaves uncurled and stretched. The stem shot upward before my eyes. Ice crystals formed along the leaf edges like tiny pearls. Weiss nearly dropped his glasses. I couldn't breathe. To the lake. Now, I grabbed the pot and ran. Snowpuff spiraled around me the whole way, leaving a trail of ice flowers on the ground behind us. When we reached Breeze Lake, the thin ice cracked open on its own the moment Snowpuff got close. She flew to the center of the lake, her blue curls floating in waves of magical energy, and began to sing. Her voice was small and childlike, but the melody felt ancient, something older than this world. The sky churned with clouds. Not a storm, something else entirely. Perfect hexagonal snowflakes drifted down, each one etched with magical patterns like runes falling from heaven. Where they landed on the planting area, miracles happened. The sparse seedlings exploded with life. Stems shot up to waist height. Leaves turned crystal clear, their veins flowing with glowing ice blue liquid instead of ordinary sap. At the top of every plant, ice crystal buds bloomed, catching the light and throwing rainbow halos across the lake. I crouched down and carefully touched one leaf. The moment my finger made contact, a bud burst open and released a butterfly made entirely of snowflakes. It circled my hand twice, then dissolved into starlight that sank into my palm. Cool energy flowed through my meridians, not just cold, but fresh, clean magical power. Snowpuff was spent. Her little face flushed pink. She floated back to my shoulder and leaned her head against my neck, chirping sleepily. But her eyes stayed bright, admiring the frozen garden she'd created. The lake itself had transformed. It glowed soft blue. Ice lotus flowers floated across the surface, each one cradling a winter wake grass seed in its center like a sealed magical treasure. I knelt by the water's edge and stared at the fully grown herbs, plants that had been tiny dying seedlings just minutes ago. My throat was tight. "This is a miracle," I whispered. "From today, this place is called Snow Lake." I lifted Snowpuff gently in my palms. Her little claws tugged absently at my collar, while her breath froze into tiny snowflakes between us. I told her she was everything I could have hoped for and more. An elemental spirit's power was truly beyond imagination. She rubbed her pink cheek against my thumb and chirped contentedly. On the lake, a tiny ice deer sculpture suddenly came alive, prancing across the frozen flowers toward us before dissolving into glittering mist at Snowpuff's feet. I stroked her soft curly hair. The snowflake clips in her hair bloomed with light. casting a canopy of ice crystals above our heads. From today, this isn't just Snow Lake. It's your home. She burst into the air with excitement, drew a giant snowflake pattern in the sky, then crashed back into my chest, pressing her cold little nose against my neck. I laughed and flicked her nose gently. I knew you'd pick this place. But promise me, guard this lake and take care of these herbs. They'll be the key to Eagle Town's future. She straightened up proudly and patted her tiny chest. Then she suddenly remembered something, started bouncing in my palm, chirping frantically and miming eating motions. Yes, yes, I said, laughing. You can still visit Aunt Bev for sweets whenever you want. She shot into the air, spinning loops of joy, scattering snowflakes that made the herb buds glow even brighter. As night fell, Snow Lake became something out of a dream, moonlight and magic swirling together over crystalline water. Snowpuff commanded little ice animal sculptures to patrol the perimeter, chirping orders like a miniature general. What had seemed impossible, growing magical herbs, was solved by a palm-sized sprite with a sweet tooth. Snow Lake would give Eagle Town its own magical resource point. 3 resource points now: Camel Bulls, the Black Rock Mine, and the Herb Lake. That put us on par with some viscounts. But I knew this kind of fortune would attract attention. When word of Snow Lake spread, there would be people who wanted to take it from us. For now, though, I just watched Snowpuff happily herding her ice creatures under the stars, and let myself feel grateful. The blizzard raged for half a month straight. Eagle Town was buried under snow, cut off from the world. Roads vanished. Mountains disappeared behind white curtains. The only connection we had to the outside was Thunderhawk, who braved the storms daily on patrol, its lightning trail flickering through the gray sky. One morning, Thunderhawk came diving through the snow carrying an unconscious woman in its claws. I ran over immediately and called for Lisa. The woman wore a deep blue robe embroidered with magical patterns that glowed faintly, even soaked through with snow. But what really caught my eye was the silver badge on her chest, 2 water ripples circling a crystal droplet. That was the mark of the Ring Mage Tower, identifying her as a mid-level water mage. Mages are incredibly rare and valuable. Every faction on the continent fights to recruit them. I wasn't about to handle this carelessly. Her face was white as snow, lips drained of color, hair plastered to her skin. No visible wounds. I checked her pulse, weak but steady. Her fingertips still held traces of magical energy. I guess she'd burned through all her mana and collapsed. I had Weiss put her in our warmest guest room with a roaring fire, the best healing potions, hot soup, and blankets. Lisa confirmed my diagnosis. No injuries, just total magical exhaustion. She'd need days to recover. Before she woke, I made sure to tell Snowpuff to stay at Snow Lake and not come to town. I didn't know this woman's identity yet, and an elemental spirit is even rarer than a mage. Best to keep that secret hidden. Snowpuff kept sneaking to the guest room window anyway, tapping the glass with her little paws, chirping curiously. I had to shoo her away each time. On the 3rd day, the woman opened her eyes, clear blue, like lake water, with a mix of confusion and caution. She tried to sit up when she saw me, but her body was too weak and she fell back onto the pillows. I told her to relax. She was in Eagle Town, and my eagle had found her in the blizzard. She introduced herself as Isabella Hall, an inspector dispatched by the Ring Mage Tower to the Northern Territories. She'd been crossing the Tana Mountains when the unprecedented blizzard hit. She'd overused her magic, trying to force a path through, and passed out from mana depletion. Then she said something that got my attention. She was carrying an urgent mission and needed to reach Sea Blue City, the capital of Eliade Province, ruled by Marquis Eliade, the most powerful lord in our entire province. It sat on the far eastern coast, and getting there from Eagle Town meant passing through Seaview Town, Kenlon Town, Blue Whale City, and 4 more territories. A very long journey, especially in winter. I started to tell her that in her condition, traveling was impossible right now. She understood before I finished. Then she made her request. She'd seen Thunderhawk and knew it could carry a rider through the sky. She asked me to lend it to escort her to Sea Blue City. As payment, she produced a walnut-sized white pearl that glowed with blue light. A magic detection pearl, a precious alchemical item that could sense anyone with magical talent within 10 meters. Essential for finding potential mage apprentices. My heart nearly stopped. I wanted that pearl desperately. But Thunderhawk was Eagle Town's only aerial scout. With the underground world threat, the aftermath of the lizard battle, and dangers on every side, sending my eagle away for what could be weeks was a serious risk. I started to refuse. "I'm sorry, Miss Isabella. I can't." She didn't let me finish. From a spatial belt at her waist, she pulled out 5 leather-bound books and laid them on the bed. Beginner's Meditation Technique. Beginner's Water Magic. Intermediate Meditation Technique. Intermediate Water Magic. And the one that made my breath catch. Beginner's Alchemy Manual. Its yellowed cover carved with mysterious runes. The exact book I'd promised Lisa I would find. "Would these, combined with the pearl, be enough to borrow your beast?" she asked, her eyes steady and determined. I stared at the books. 5 magic textbooks and a detection pearl. The foundation for training mages and an alchemist, all in one offer. Things that could change Eagle Town's future forever. I was no longer sure I could say no. I stared at the magic detection pearl and the stack of spellbooks, my knuckles white from gripping the armrest. Sea Blue City was 1,000 miles away. Thunderhawk would need at least a month for the round trip. Without my eagle, Eagle Town would be blind. No aerial scouts, no early warnings, nothing but ground patrols in a world full of threats we couldn't see coming. But those books, a beginner's alchemy manual, the exact thing I'd promised Lisa. Beginner and intermediate meditation techniques. Beginner and intermediate water magic texts. And the pearl that could find people with magical talent. Together, these could transform Eagle Town from a backwater barony into something with real magical capability. I told Isabella the payment was too generous. She shook her head, her blue eyes sharp with urgency. Getting to see Blue City mattered more to her than anything. And she added, quietly, that during her 3 days unconscious, she'd felt the kindness of Eagle Town. These items were simply her way of showing gratitude. I exhaled slowly and agreed. 3 days later, Isabella stood in the town square, color returning to her face. She stroked Thunderhawk's feathers and cast a water magic shield over it for protection. Then she climbed onto its back, waved to me, and Thunderhawk launched into the gray sky with a long cry. I watched them disappear into the storm and felt the weight of what I'd just traded away. For the next stretch of days, I carried the magic detection pearl everywhere. I walked through every street of Eagle Town, every corner of Black Rock Village, every hunter's cabin and miner's barracks. I held the pearl near every person I passed. Young, old, man, woman, slave, free citizen. Nothing. Not a single glow. Not one flicker. Standing at the edge of Black Rock Village, looking at the mountains, I finally understood why mages were so rare. Magical talent wasn't something you could find just by looking harder. In a town of thousands, there might not be a single person born with the gift. Lisa, on the other hand, went absolutely wild when I gave her the beginner's alchemy manual. Her hands shook holding it. She promised me she'd master it and brew Eagle Town's first real magical potion. From that day on, her workshop glowed through the night. Strange lights, sharp smells, and occasional small explosions. The villagers gave her building a wide berth, half curious and half terrified. Lisa didn't notice. She was completely lost in her research, surrounded by bottles and ingredients, following the manual step by careful step. Then word came from Black Rock Village. The Minotaur had woken up. I rode out immediately on my war horse, cutting through the snow. Even at full gallop, the horse was painfully slow compared to Thunderhawk. I missed my eagle already. When I pushed open the door of the stone hut, the smell of herbs and old blood hit me. The Minotaur was sitting up against the wall, nearly 3 meters tall, dark brown fur matted with dried blood, a bronze collar carved with strange runes around his thick neck. His stone axe hung at his waist, its blade chipped and coated in the same purple slime I'd seen on dust bark. He lurched to his feet when I entered, smashing his head against the ceiling beam. His yellow eyes burned with suspicion. Dustbark jumped in front of me and quickly explained who I was. The Minotaur's massive nostrils flared as he studied me. His thick fingers rubbed the handle of his axe. Slowly, as Dustbark kept talking, his muscles relaxed. "Human, Lord," he rumbled. I pulled back my hood and kept my voice calm. I told him he was safe. I had Daniel bring meat soup. The Minotaur took the bowl in a hand the size of a dinner plate and drained it in one gulp. Then I asked what happened to him. His voice cracked with grief. Half a month ago, he'd led 13 of his tribe's people into the Tana Mountains to gather snow-heart grass, a medicine for a plague spreading through their lands. Near Flame's Sun Valley, they ran straight into the underground world's creatures. A black tide of monsters poured over them, spraying purple venom that could eat through bone, biting through limbs like snapping twigs. They fled deeper into the mountains, but kept hitting more dangers: the fire-breathing serpent, the ice-claw wolves. One by one, his people fell. In the end, only he crawled over the mountain pass alive. The room went silent except for the fire crackling. He reached into his belt and pulled out a half-wilted snow heartgrass, ice crystals still clinging to its leaves. "I am Ogre Warhoof," he said. "This plant. My people paid with their lives for it." He held it out to me. "You saved me. It's yours." I hadn't expected the underground creatures to be that devastating. An entire Minotaur squad, wiped out. That confirmed everything. The underground world was spreading, and it was far more dangerous than I'd assumed. I looked at Ogre's scarred body and spoke gently. The Tana Mountains were crawling with monsters now, and the underground creatures controlled the other side. He couldn't go back, not anytime soon. But Eagle Town was a place where humans, beastmen, and dwarves already lived together. He was welcome to stay in Black Rock Village until spring, when we could figure out a way to get him home. He had no other choice, and he knew it. "Thank you, human lord," he said quietly. I rode home through the dark, snow falling steadily around me. Behind me, Black Rock Village's lights flickered through the storm. Ahead lay Eagle Town, its walls hidden in white. I'd gained rare books, a detection pearl, a Minotaur warrior, and confirmation that the underground world was worse than I'd feared. And I'd lost my eagle for at least a month. The trades we make to survive in this world never come easy. After Ogre settled into Black Rock Village, life in Eagle Town slowed down to something almost peaceful. Snowpuff kept the blizzard at bay, humming her little songs while stacking snow into glowing blue walls around the town. She'd become our best defense against winter itself. I buried myself in training. The breakthrough pearl hung in my palm, pouring energy into my meridians with every session. The pain was sharp, but the growth was real. My mid-level knight foundation was thickening steadily. The pearl's power still amazed me. It seemed bottomless, had no element of its own, yet transformed into wind chi the moment I needed it. I'd also figured something out. Mill and Thunderhawk had both been stuck at peak mid-level for a while, despite having more than enough accumulated power. I suspected the reason was me. When I'd broken through to mid-level knight, Rashid had immediately broken through too. The card summons seemed linked to my own level, like chained beasts that could only rise when I did. If I reached high-level knight, all 4 of my summons would advance with me. Eagle Town would suddenly have 4 high-level fighters. That thought drove me harder than anything. The town was growing stronger in every way. Several more guards had reached knight apprentice level. Charles, Benson, and others, 12 apprentices total, 1 leading each squad. They trained relentlessly in the snow, sparring, and drilling formations. Charles split the winter air with his sword and shouted that they weren't just guards anymore. They were Eagle Town's blade. In Black Rock Village, Ogre's enormous strength had boosted mining output dramatically. Mountains of black rock were piled up, enough to forge a whole new batch of weapons and armor. Daniel was thrilled. At the ranch, 3 new camel bull calves were playing in the snow, bumping their hornless heads against drifts to find hidden hay. Ellie brought them grain and got mobbed by affectionate little noses. Snow Lake was flourishing under Snowpuff's care. The winter wake grass grew lush and bright, every leaf shimmering like pearl. Ice flowers floated on the surface, their cores glowing softly. Snowpuff sat in her little ice castle at the lake's center, commanding ice animal patrols and scaring off birds with colored snowfall. Then everything shattered. Snowpuff froze mid-air above Snow Lake, her blue curls standing on end, her round eyes wide with terror, staring toward the Tana Mountains. At the same instant, an invisible force slammed me off my feet in the training room. The breakthrough pearl clattered to the floor, its amber glow flickering wildly. Thunder split the sky. The ground shook so violently that Aunt Bev's iron pot crashed to the floor, hot soup splashing across the stones. In the mines, purple slime seeped from cracking walls. The guards' swords vibrated and screamed on their own, eagle crests warping on the blades. I grabbed the windowsill and looked up. A bird made of ice tore through the clouds. It was 100 meters long. Its wings were edged with razor-sharp icicles, and every beat carved spiderweb patterns of frost across the sky. A crown of ice crystals sat on its head, refracting cold light. It looked down at the world the way a god looks at insects. From deep in the mountains came a roar that turned my blood to ice. The sound wave was physical. It stripped 10 miles of snow clean off the earth, exposing scorched black ground underneath. I gripped the window frame until my knuckles went white. That icebird's wingspan was wider than all of Eagle Town. And as the roar echoed, the magical elements in the air went berserk. My own chi boiled inside me, thrashing out of control. Screams rose from Blackrock Village. Ogre, the 3-meter minotaur, was forced to his knees by the sheer pressure, his bronze collar groaning. Mill collapsed in his forge as invisible force cracked his furnace. Every living creature for miles dropped flat. Even the fiercest wolves whimpered with their tails between their legs. Then I saw the second one. Purple miasma erupted from the mountains. A serpent-like creature burst from the earth, its scales gleaming like cold metal, spewing not fire but purple-black venom that dissolved everything it touched. It faced the ice bird across the sky, and every time it hissed, the sky itself cracked like glass. In the distance, smoke rose from Thorntown and Violet Town. They were feeling this too. The standoff lasted maybe 15 minutes. It felt like a century. When the ice bird finally let out one last piercing cry and vanished into the clouds as a streak of light, everyone collapsed. We couldn't move. The residual pressure pinned us to the ground. My throat felt packed with molten lead, and every breath tasted of blood. Transcendent level, I whispered, forcing myself upright. My clothes were soaked through with sweat. Against power like that, we're nothing but ants. I stared at the Tana Mountains, still shrouded in purple haze. The message was clear. Whatever lived in those mountains, whatever had emerged from the underground world, operated on a scale so far beyond us that all our victories, all our growth, all our preparations meant absolutely nothing. We'd killed a flame lizard and felt proud. Now the real monsters had shown their faces, and I understood for the first time just how small we truly were. The shockwave from those two titans rippled across the entire region. News spread fast. Every town, every city, every lord from here to the coast was talking about what happened over the Tana Mountains. Fear spread like a plague. People panicked. Rumors flew. Some said the gods were angry. Others whispered about the end of the world. In Latte City, Viscount Andrew read the intelligence reports with shaking hands, barely able to believe what he was reading. He mobilized every knight and mage under his command and put the entire territory on war footing. In Sea Blue City, Marquis Eliade stood atop his magic watchtower, staring toward the mountains. The crystal orb on his staff flickered wildly, reflecting the violent disturbance in magical elements across the land. He ordered all personnel to stay away from the mountains and strengthen the city's magical barriers. Blue Whale City's harbor went silent. Ships stopped sailing. Fishermen refused to go out. In the taverns, terrified voices argued about what they'd witnessed. The sky changing color, the earth trembling, divine wrath. Far away in the Sun Territory, in a gleaming palace, the ruler of the Sapphire Duchy, the Sapphire Grand Duke himself, stood before a massive map. When his intelligence mage suggested the creatures were transcendent-level beasts, the Grand Duke shook his head. They're not transcendent. They're sacred level. The true apex of this continent. His mage went white. Sacred-level magical beasts hadn't been seen in hundreds of years. Everyone thought they'd vanished. But the Grand Duke had seen one in his youth, and he recognized the power. He was himself a sacred-level fighter, the strongest human in the Tasman Kingdom, and even he had no confidence he could defeat either of those creatures, let alone both. He ordered every territory to strengthen defenses and stay put. His intelligence network would monitor the mountains around the clock. He needed to understand why two sacred-level beasts had appeared and what they wanted. In Seaview Town, Baron Nash huddled in his chair, cold sweat running down his face. He'd seen the ice bird freeze the clouds beneath its wings, seen the serpent's breath melt the mountainside. He told Roderick their walls were nothing but sandcastles to creatures like those. Roderick suggested asking Earl Rep for help. Nash laughed bitterly. The Earl was probably trembling just as badly. Thorntown's medicinal herb gardens were devastated. Plants wilted, flowers dropped, leaves scattered. The pharmacist stared at the ruin, saying he'd lived nearly 40 years and never seen nature disrupted like this. His apprentice noted that at least they'd fared better than Violet Town, where the entire snow silkworm population had died. Back in Eagle Town, the aftermath was grim. I stood on the wall, staring at the purple glow still hanging over the mountains, my back soaked with cold sweat beneath my armor. Snowpuff's ice barriers had been ground to powder by the pressure wave. During the event, I couldn't even hold my sword. My chi had gone haywire inside me, like someone was squeezing my heart. Charles was already leading teams to rebuild structures that had collapsed under the beast's aura. He was still shaking. He reported that the kobolds had found purple slime seeping through the mine walls, corroding their pickaxes. Ogre still couldn't bring himself to look toward the mountains. Snowpuff dove down from the clouds and crashed into my arms, crying softly. Her wing edges were scorched, and her snowflake hair clips had gone dim, the cost of trying to shield the town with her magic against that overwhelming force. I carried her inside and called everyone to the council hall. The stone walls threw flickering shadows from the torches. Every face around the table was heavier than the darkness behind them. I set a jug of strong liquor on the table with a thud. "Sit down," I said. "No strategy talk tonight. Have a drink first. Let's warm up the courage those monsters scared out of us." Nobody argued. We all needed it. What I'd witnessed today redefined everything I thought I knew about power in this world. Those weren't just strong beasts. They were sacred level, the absolute peak. The Grand Duke of the Sapphire Duchy, the mightiest human alive, wouldn't dare fight either one alone. And they were living in the mountains right next to my territory. I poured myself a full cup and drank it in one go. The burn felt good. It reminded me I was still alive. Mill grabbed the first bowl of liquor, not even noticing it splashing over his bandaged hands. He reported that purple slime was still seeping through the mine walls. 3 kobold miners had their boots corroded right through. His voice carried real fear, but he drained the cup anyway. Lisa held up a pair of gloves stained with the mysterious purple substance. She said the elemental signature didn't match anything in the beginner's alchemy manual. Whatever it was beyond basic-level materials. Snowpuff was curled up on my shoulder, her scorched wings still trembling. But even now, the stubborn little thing reached up and patted my cheek with her paw, trying to comfort me. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told them straight. When that ice bird blocked out the sky, I nearly lost control of my bladder. When the serpent breathed, my chi went haywire, and I thought my body was going to tear itself apart. But then I splashed my liquor on the ground, and the fire leaped up, lighting my face. "We're still alive," I said. "Eagle Town is still standing." I drew my sword and started giving orders. Charles would inspect every defensive wall, focusing on foundations cracked by the pressure wave. Lisa would study the purple slime with whatever resources she needed. Weiss would redistribute supplies to keep miners and soldiers fed. And Snowpuff would be our eyes. Any movement from the mountains, report to me immediately. Then the door crashed open and Ogre filled the doorway, vines from the mine still hanging off his horns. He set a stone bowl on the table, filled with glowing purple slime from the tunnels. "I can help," he rumbled. "My tribe has seen this before. We always collected it in stone bowls." I looked at the bowl. He was right. The stone showed zero corrosion, while the slime ate through metal like water through paper. Ogre didn't know exactly what the substance was. His chieftain had called it the Earth's Curse. He pulled out a chunk of metal riddled with holes. A tribesman had tried using the slime to repair a weapon once, and the entire sword dissolved into black water overnight. Mill's eyes lit up like forged flames. He practically lunged across the table, muttering about how useful this could be for his smithing work. I took a deep breath and focused on what we could control. I ordered Daniel to have Black Rock Village collect every drop of the slime and continue mining operations as normal. Over the next 2 weeks, Eagle Town slowly steadied itself. We patched the cracked walls with a mix of black rock and Snowpuff's ice crystals. Patrol routes resumed. The purple haze over the Tana Mountains never faded, a constant reminder that the nightmare had been real. I split my days into strict routines. At dawn, I rode to the Camel Bull Ranch. The 3 calves had learned to crowd around me, nuzzling my boots with their wet noses. The mother camel bulls still watched the mountains uneasily, glowing whenever the wind carried sulfur. Every day I visited Snow Lake. Snowpuff had built herself a tiny ice fortress at the center, glowing blue like a sapphire set in snow. The winter wake grass was thriving under her care, its leaves covered in dewdrops that refracted 7 colors of light. She'd place an ice flower in my palm each visit, her way of trying to chase the worry off my face. In the mines, Ogre swung his stone axe with tremendous power, shattering rock with every blow. The purple slime was collected in stone troughs, flowing like a river of liquid amethyst. Daniel reported that the seepage was slowing down. The walls were returning to normal. We'd collected a good amount already. Mill had taken some for forging experiments, and the rest was stored back in Eagle Town. I didn't know yet what the slime was truly worth. I planned to send some with Baru on the next caravan to Latte City, where traders and scholars might identify its grade and value. Between the black rock or stockpile, the camel bull products filling our warehouses, and now this mysterious material, the next trading run would bring Eagle Town serious wealth. Daniel had been doing excellent work managing Blackrock Village. He'd grown from my childhood playmate into a reliable administrator. I told him so, and the pride on his face reminded me how much had changed since I'd first arrived in this world. The rest of my time went to training. I sealed myself in the practice room with the breakthrough pearl, pushing chi through my meridians hour after hour. My mid-level knight foundation grew thicker by the day, but every time I closed my eyes to concentrate, I saw that serpent's purple-black breath melting the mountainside. That image drove me harder than any ambition. I had to get stronger, faster. The gap between me and those sacred-level creatures was so vast, it felt meaningless to even measure. But I couldn't stop. If I broke through to high-level knight, Mill, Thunderhawk, and Snowpuff would all advance too. 4 high-level fighters wouldn't scare a sacred-level beast, but it was a start. Late at night, when the town slept, I'd climb the watchtower alone. Wind and fine snow stung my face through the visor. The purple haze over the mountains pulsed in the moonlight like the breathing of something enormous and patient. Snowpuff would always find me up there eventually, landing on my shoulder, pressing her cold cheek against my neck. No chirping, no games, just quiet company. I gripped my sword and stared at the mountains. Whatever storm was building behind those peaks, Eagle Town would face it standing. It started with a bowl of stew and a terrible drink. Aunt Bev's camel bull meat was simmering in rich gravy, perfectly spiced with herbs Baru had brought from Latte City. But the liquor he'd bought there was awful, cloudy, sour, with a raw burn that scraped my throat. I took one sip and grimaced. Before I came to this world, I'd worked in a craft beer bar. I knew what good alcohol tasted like, and this wasn't it. Weiss mentioned that Latte City had tightened its liquor ban to conserve grain for winter. That explained the terrible quality. But staring at that murky cup, an idea sparked in my head. I remembered watching distilling videos in my past life. Simple stuff: fermentation, heat control, condensation. Eagle Town had black rye, camel bull milk for sugar content, and plenty of cold surfaces for condensing. We had everything we needed except the technique. That afternoon, I raided the storage room. I found a copper pot Mill had discarded, had Weiss bring me the biggest oak barrel available, and grabbed a block of ice for condensation. Aunt Bev walked in with fresh bread and stared at the mess of copper pipes and wooden barrels covering the floor. I told her I was making stronger liquor. My first attempt was a disaster. I mixed black rye flour with camel bull milk, sealed it with some of Snowpuff's ice crystals to speed fermentation, and waited 3 days. When I heated the copper pot, the whole room filled with a sour, rotten smell. The liquid that dripped through was clear, but tasted so foul that Mill spat it out immediately, coughing that it was worse than forge ash. The temperature had been too high, pulling out all the impurities. I remembered the videos saying you needed to hold the heat right at alcohol's boiling point. I borrowed Lisa's precision thermometer from her alchemy work and built a new double-walled still from cold-resistant cedar wood. A week later, I tried again. This time I watched the temperature carefully. The liquid that came through was crystal clear. I took a cautious sip, strong rye flavor up front, followed by a smooth warmth going down. Not as good as the whiskey I remembered, but 100 times better than Latte City's swill. Weiss's face turned bright red after 1 cup. He said it was more fragrant than anything from Latte City. Mill drained a full mug and admitted it reminded him of dwarven spirits, only smoother. but I wasn't satisfied. The taste was still rough, missing that deep richness that comes from aging. Real whiskey needs oak barrel time. Our current barrels had too much resin flavor. Then I remembered, at the bottom of Snow Lake, there were ancient sunken oak trees, their bark turned deep black, giving off a faint pine scent. 2 weeks later, I poured the new batch into small barrels made from Snow Lake sunken wood. Lisa added a touch of cedar juice for sweetness. When we cracked open the first barrel, the aroma that poured out stopped everyone in their tracks. Rye, oak, and a light grassy freshness from the winter wake grass influence. Mill held his cup with eyes as wide as coins. Is this magic? I've never tasted anything this good. I took a sip. Smooth entry, strong wheat flavor, then deep oak warmth, finishing with a cool, clean aftertaste. It was genuinely excellent. I told Weiss to share it with everyone. When Charles came in from patrol, frozen stiff, and smelled the amber liquid in his tin cup, he froze. After one sip, his voice trembled. He said it warmed him like Snow Puff's magic, but tasted richer than Violet Town's honey wine. Benson grabbed the jug and poured himself a full cup, then declared it could fetch 10 carts of wheat at Latte City's market. Baru rushed over from the warehouse. As our head merchant, he had the sharpest nose for value. He sniffed the cup, and his eyes lit up instantly. He said the aroma was like bottling winter sunshine. He'd seen Earl Rep's personal vintage, Sunset Gold, and claimed our brew was just as good, if not better. He started tapping the table excitedly. If we could produce this in volume, it would become Eagle Town's most powerful trade good. Even better, Latte City's liquor ban meant the Earl's own distillery had shut down. If we stockpiled before spring, prices could triple. I leaned against the wall of barrels. Ogre and I had spent 3 days carving these from Snow Lake wood. I told them not to rush. Grain and milk had to feed our people first. Once spring came, milk production would rise and stored grain would last until the new harvest. Then we could scale up. But Baru wouldn't let go. He calculated that using low-grade flour and small amounts of milk, we could produce at least 20 barrels a month with just 1/10 of our reserves. Lisa offered to develop a special yeast that would cut fermentation time in half and keep the liquor stable indefinitely. Mill volunteered his forge for conversion into a distillery. He already had copper pots and fire pits ready. Watching them plan and argue, I realized this was more than just brewing. It was a lifeline. In my old world, medieval Europe had been connected by wine trade routes. Maybe this liquor could do the same for Eagle Town. It needs a name, Baru announced. He suggested Eagle's Cry. Mill shook his head and proposed Icebreaker, because it hit like splitting ice. Then Rashid, who'd been quiet the whole time, spoke up. How about Eagle's Kiss? The room went silent. I turned the name over in my mind. Eagle's Kiss. Elegant, memorable, unmistakably ours. Perfect, I said. Mill stared at Rashid in disbelief. I never expected a muscle-bound knight to come up with something that beautiful. I raised my cup. To Eagle's Kiss. To good liquor. To Eagle Town. Baru slammed his cup against mine with a ring. When the caravan goes out in spring, I'll make sure the whole Sapphire Duchy knows that Eagle Town brews liquor strong enough to make a dragon pass out. In the days that followed, new wooden buildings went up along the main road. Rashid split Snow Lake timber with his greatsword. Mill forged copper distilling equipment. Lisa experimented with yeasts in her workshop. Every evening, the brewery chimney sent up gentle smoke, and the air filled with the warm scent of grain and pine. In a town still living under the shadow of sacred-level beasts, that smell gave us something we badly needed. A reason to believe tomorrow would be better than today. Late that night, I sat alone in my training room at Eagle Fort. Snowfluff was with me, her soft wings brushing the air. The cards floating above me started to glow again, the 5th resonance. But this time, instead of fire or lightning, they shone with a gentle silver light, like moonlight. When the light burst, a silver figure appeared out of thin air, surrounded by tiny pieces of moonlight. Snowfluff squeaked and hid inside my cloak. I couldn't move. I just stared. A woman knelt on one knee before me. Her long silver hair fell like a waterfall, shining like pearls. She wore fitted silver armor covered in crescent moon patterns, and a moon badge on her shoulder slowly spun, leaking pale white energy. Her sword rested against her knee, narrower than a normal longsword, with a moonstone set in the guard that glowed in harmony with her armor. Peak mid-rank knight. I thought. Just as I expected, the Summon Knight's level never went above my own. What surprised me was how still she stayed. From the moment she appeared, she never moved from that kneeling position. Her silver-gray eyes held no pride at all, only pure loyalty. "My name is Selene Moonblade," she said. Her voice rang out clear and sharp, like ice water hitting stone. "From this moment, I swear by the moon goddess. I pledge my loyalty to you, my lord." She pressed her hand against the moon badge on her chest, and her battle energy surged, casting a huge crescent shadow on the floor. I accept your loyalty, knight." I finally snapped out of my shock. When I helped her stand, my fingers touched her armor and felt a wave of coolness. "Welcome to Eagle Town, Knight Selene." I looked at the moonlight patterns flowing across her armor. "Selene, your battle energy attribute." She seemed to already know my question. "It's moon." "Moon attribute." Moon attribute? I'd never heard of such a thing. I didn't dwell on it, though. I looked at her armor and sword instead. My sword Moon Trace and my armor New Moon Plate are both beginner-rank alchemical gear, she explained. They boost my battle energy by 30% on full moon nights. Snowfluff finally poked her head out from my cloak and curiously tapped Selene's sword with her little claw. To my surprise, the sword didn't reject her. Instead, the blade trembled slightly and formed a tiny ice crystal crescent on Snowfluff's claw tip. "She seems to have an affinity with ice magic," Selene said with a slight frown. "Moon attribute energy does share a subtle connection with water elements." By morning, I was standing on the watchtower at the guard camp, watching the transport team from Black Rock Village Hall mined or into Eagle Town. To my surprise, Mill the dwarf had come along too. I guessed he'd run out of ale again. I need to keep a closer eye on what was left of our Eagle's Kiss supply. Selene stood quietly 3 steps behind me, her silver armor catching the early sunlight with a cold gleam. At the training ground, I addressed everyone. "I know you're all curious," I said, pausing on purpose. Selene stepped forward, her silver hair lifting in the wind like a flowing curtain. "This is Knight Selene Moonblade," I announced. "Peak mid-rank knight, moon attribute battle energy. She'll be joining Eagle Town's defense from now on." Gasps broke out immediately. Charles's sword clanged against his shield. Benson's eyes went wide as coins, and even Steward Weiss looked startled. A peak mid-rank knight meant our top fighting power had just doubled. Mill let out a loud whistle. "Huh? Tougher than the hardest black rock I've ever forged." Selene gave a slight nod, her silver eyes sweeping over the group. But when she spotted the grass bits on Charles's cloak, the corner of her lips curved just barely. I pretended not to notice and kept going. "Knight Selene's battle energy is a bit unusual. Moon attribute energy." "Moon attribute?" Charles couldn't help cutting in. "Is it like Snowfluff's ice type?" "Of course not." Selene finally spoke. Her voice was cool and precise. "Moon attribute energy has a subtle link to water elements. But the difference is like comparing dwarf forging to a child playing in mud." She paused, her gaze landing on the ale stains in Mill's beard. "At the very least, a true moon attribute user wouldn't wear their breakfast on their face." The dwarf's face turned bright red as he scrambled to wipe his beard. Then Selene's eyes moved to Charles's grass-covered cloak. "It seems the guard captain's bedtime hobby is wrestling with baby camel bulls." Benson nearly choked. Charles went red too. He really had been rolling in snow that morning chasing a runaway camel bull calf. "Knight Selene, last night's patrol," he tried to explain. She cut him off. "A patrolman who turns himself into a snowman? In the entire Sapphire Duchy, that's probably unique to Eagle Town's guards." Mill burst out laughing like a bell, but went silent the instant Selene turned toward him. "The dwarf gentleman has yesterday's stew hiding in his beard," she said, pointing at the meat scraps in his thick whiskers with a bread knife. "Perhaps you should consider cleaning your beard with a forging hammer." Mill's face went from red to green. He grabbed a piece of bread and bit down hard, sending crumbs all over Selene's polished boots. "Oh, so dwarves show respect to a lady by brushing her shoes with breadcrumbs." Selene stepped back half a pace, her boot tips scraping a silver line across the stone. Steward Weiss pulled out a white handkerchief right away. "Please allow me to." "No need," Selene sidestepped him. "I'd rather not let noble perfume contaminate my moon attribute energy." The old steward froze with his handkerchief in the air, his polite smile nearly turning to stone. My own smile was getting stiff too. I suddenly realized that this beautiful, cool-looking knight of mine was actually quite sharp-tongued. Celine's sharp tongue didn't stop after that first morning. It only got worse. In the forge, she watched Mill hammering black rock ore and told him he was just turning it into low-quality scrap iron. She picked up a twisted horseshoe with her sword tip and said even a camel bull would chip its teeth trying to chew on it. When Mill slammed his tongs down and argued that black rock was too hard for anyone else to work with, she calmly suggested he try using a magic furnace to preheat it instead of relying on brute force until he turned himself into a muscle-bound iron fool. Then she asked if he'd accidentally used Lisa's anti-corrosion potion as cooling liquid yesterday. Dustbark's hand slipped and dropped a coal block when he heard that. Mill's face turned redder than his furnace and stammered it was a mistake. Celine raised an eyebrow and said dwarf blacksmiths apparently had eyesight as disappointing as their height. At the training ground, she watched Benson yell at his men during shield wall practice and asked if Eagletown's core battle strategy was to scare enemies away with noise. Benson's veins bulged on his forehead. She pointed at the crooked shield formation and said it couldn't even push through the ice fish in Snow Lake. Charles tried to smooth things over, but she added that compared to a certain captain who turned patrols into snowball fights, this was already neat. In the alchemy lab, she appeared at the door while Lisa was struggling with her blood-clotting paste. Celine told her that any alchemist should know a gold crucible worked far better than an iron one. Lisa nearly knocked over her reagent bottle and asked how she knew that. Celine picked up Lisa's beginner alchemy book and said it wasn't even recorded in there. So Lisa was basically just following along with something even a child who just learned to read could manage. By the lake that evening, she watched Snowfluff proudly show off a little ice sculpture of a camel bull, then told her the craftsmanship was just like the guard's shield formation. Both needed a mirror to take a good look at themselves. Snowfluff squeaked and hid behind her ice fort. I happened to walk by and tried to defend Snowfluff, but Celine cut me off, saying you couldn't expect an elemental being to have taste, just like you couldn't expect a dwarf blacksmith to understand moon attribute energy. At dinner, Mill picked out all the carrots from his stew and piled them up. Celine picked up a burnt piece of meat and said dwarves weren't just good at forging scrap iron. They could also turn food into rocks. Before Mill could argue back, she turned to Steward Weiss and added that compared to certain nobles who chanted etiquette rules like magic spells, this was at least edible. Late that night, I found Celine standing guard alone on the wall. Moonlight fell on the crescent patterns of her armor, and they rose and fell gently with her breathing. Today, thanks for not being harsh to Dustbark, I said, remembering how the kobold had nervously brought her or samples earlier and she'd stayed quiet for once. I was just thinking, she said, her voice cutting clear through the wind and snow, about how to explain to a kobold who eats or as snacks that mineral essence isn't jam. She glanced at me, her silver eyes flickering in the dark. But since the moon pattern stone he brought was decent quality, I'll let him off for now. The same way I let Mill off for bread that's harder than rocks. I couldn't help laughing, but stopped when her gaze met mine. Everyone just wants to get along with you, I said. Oh, she raised an eyebrow. With meat scraps in their beards, or with the kind of enthusiasm that mistakes anti-corrosion potion for cooling liquid? Snowfluff suddenly flew out from my cloak with something shiny in her mouth. Celine's hand went to her sword on instinct, but the little creature just placed a small piece of moon-patterned stone in her palm. Cheap. It was just a common mineral, but it happened to be useful for someone with moon attribute energy. Celine's fingertips trembled slightly. The stone resonated with her armor, giving off a soft silver glow. She was quiet for a moment, then tucked it into a small pouch. Her voice, for once, didn't have its usual icy edge, since it has a bit of shine to it. I'll reluctantly accept. As she turned away, the crescent patterns on. Her armor seemed to soften just a little. I thought to myself that maybe this sharp-tongued iceberg of a moon knight would slowly thaw in Eagletown's winds and snow. After all, even Snowfluff understood. To win over the cold and proud Moonblade, you needed shiny moon-patterned stones, not a dwarf's rock-hard bread. The next day, Lisa burst into the meeting hall holding a jar of blood-clotting paste that glowed with a smooth, golden-threaded sheen. A scroll was still half-draped over her shoulder, and her alchemy apron was dusted with moon-patterned stone powder. It worked. It really worked, she cried, her voice shaking with excitement. When I switched to a gold crucible like you said and adjusted the potion ratios. The moment those gold threads appeared, I finally understood what herbal fusion meant in the beginner alchemy book. Celine paused mid-polish of her moontrace sword. Her silver eyes swept over Lisa's flushed face. She noticed the potion stains from an exploded crucible on the girl's temple, and she was about to say something cutting. But then she saw the worn beginner alchemy book in Lisa's arms, its spine covered in new crooked notes from being read over and over. "So you finally learned not to bury your head in scrolls," Celine said, sheathing her sword. "But next time you mix potions, open the vents wider. Last time the smoke nearly made Snowfluff think Eagletown was on fire." Lisa didn't mind the barb at all. She grinned, showing her little fang tooth. "If you hadn't," said, "an alchemist who just follows the book is no different from a walking bookshelf. I'd probably still be stuck on the 37th stirring technique." She looked at Celine carefully. "Thank you so much for your help." The news spread through Eaglefort fast. Charles and the guards showed up with rough handmade celebration wreaths. Celine was leaning in the shadow of the Arrow Tower, watching Lisa excitedly explain herbal fusion to Steward Weiss. The old steward nodded with his usual noble grace, though his hair had somehow picked up purple potion powder. Mill strolled over with a fresh batch of Eagle's Kiss, this time carefully sealed with a proper cork. "Hey, Ice Queen," he said, "want to try a real dwarf brew?" She glanced at the crooked, improved version, carved on the jar. "I trust Snowfluff's taste more than a dwarf who uses a forging hammer as a bottle opener." But when Snowfluff flew over with a cup of the malt-scented liquor, Celine took it. I watched all of this and smiled. Eagletown finally had its own potion maker. February 18th, year 541 of the Tasman Kingdom calendar. I opened my window that morning and felt something different. The wind was wet and smelled like earth instead of carrying ice. The blizzard that had lasted for months was finally over. The mountains in the distance had shed their thick blankets of snow, showing their dark outlines again. People came out of their homes smiling. It had been a long time since anyone looked that happy. Steward Weiss brought me hot wheat ale and told me the snow on the west wall had melted down to ankle level. The night guards had spotted the camel bulls already nibbling on moss beneath the melting snow. Even the old steward looked relieved, though his sleeves still had ink stains from checking the grain records last night. I sipped the ale and asked about Baru's preparations. Weiss told me Baru had been up since dawn counting goods, too excited to even eat breakfast. I reminded Weiss to have the farming team start checking the land for plowing as soon as the snow cleared. I remembered a farming documentary I'd seen back in my old world and told him to collect camel bull dung and mix it with black rock mineral powder. It might improve the soil. Weiss nodded and left to carry out the orders. Over the next few days, everyone in Eagle Fort was busy getting the trade caravan ready. Crates of black rock were carefully loaded onto ox carts, along with a small amount of Eagle's Kiss. Since our supply was limited, Baru planned to bring just a little this time to start building a market for it. Lisa sealed up her newly made blood-clotting paste for Baru to take along, just in case. On a bright, sunny morning, the caravan was about to set off when a guard ran up to me. "My lord, a trade caravan is heading toward Eagle Fort. Their flag has a violet on it." Weiss thought for a moment and said quietly, "That's from Violet Town. It's west of us, even farther than Thorn Town, near the border of Eyelid Province and Codoran Province. The blizzard only stopped a few days ago. They must have left while the storm was still raging. That's incredibly risky." I frowned, puzzled, but ordered the guards to let them in and treat them with courtesy. The caravan's leader was a middle-aged man in fine furs. He got off his horse, bowed, and introduced himself as Ronald, head of Violet Town's trade group. He said he'd long heard of Eagle Town and had come to make a deal. Once we sat down in the meeting hall, Ronald got straight to the point. He wanted to trade their town's special snow silkworm thread for our camel bulls. 5 carts of snow silk, enough to buy 10 male camel bulls at market price, but he was only asking for 8, as a sign of good faith. His men opened the carts. The snow silk was pure white, glowing softly in the sunlight with a faint, clean fragrance. Snow silkworm thread was a beginner-rank alchemy material, far more valuable than ordinary black rock ore. I'd heard that Violet Town's small resource site was a snow silkworm garden that produced this thread. I thought about it, then politely turned him down. I told Ronald I appreciated his offer, but for Eagle Town's long-term growth, I wasn't willing to sell our camel bulls. Instead, I offered a rental arrangement. Ronald seemed surprised but recovered quickly. He agreed and asked to rent 8 camel bulls. Then he ordered his people to leave behind a full cart of snow silk as the rental fee. I was taken aback. That's far too much for renting 8 camel bulls, I said. Ronald waved it off with a smile. He said Violet Town would likely need to rent camel bulls on a regular basis and wanted to build a strong partnership. The extra silk was just a gesture of goodwill. Since he insisted, I accepted and had Weiss record everything. When Baru heard Violet Town's caravan was also heading to Lot City, he suggested they travel together for safety. Ronald happily agreed. On departure day, both caravans rolled out of Eagle Fort in a long line. Rashid rode his warhorse silently beside Baru, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. Having a mid-rank knight along was the only reason I felt somewhat at ease. The Tasman Kingdom wasn't what it was 100 years ago. The roads weren't safe anymore. The day after the caravans left, a message arrived for me. I broke the seal and read. My frown deepened with every line. "What's wrong, my lord?" Weiss asked, seeing my expression. I handed him the letter. Violet Town's snow silkworm garden is gone. What? Weiss grabbed the letter and read quickly. The pressure from giant beasts in the Tana Mountains killed all the silkworms. Snow silkworms were fragile creatures. Violet Town had always cared for them with extreme caution. But this time, 2 terrifying giant beasts had appeared without warning, and their raw pressure alone wiped out every silkworm instantly. That's not all, I sighed. To develop a new resource site as fast as possible, they spent almost everything they had. They managed to grow an iron tree forest, but the trees are so huge and heavy that transport costs are through the roof. That's why they desperately need our camel bulls. Iron trees were a beginner-rank alchemy material that could be refined into iron essence for crafting basic magic equipment. But each tree was massive and incredibly heavy. Our camel bulls, with their endurance and ability to travel through harsh terrain, were the perfect choice for hauling them. The letter says they lost over a dozen guards and townspeople on the way here, I said, rubbing the space between my eyebrows. Violet Town is barely hanging on. That's why they set out during the blizzard and offered Snow Silkworth far more than the rental fee. They had no other choice. Weiss adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. So that's why Ronald was so generous, leaving a whole cart of snow silk. They're truly desperate. Yes, I said, walking to the window and looking at the mountain range stretching across the horizon. The threat from the beasts of the Tana Mountains is already reaching the surrounding towns. Violet Town is just the first. Who knows how many others will be affected next? I thought about our own Eagle Town. We were safe for now, but the Tana Mountains hung over us like a sword, ready to fall at any moment. Weiss started to say something, but hesitated. I turned around, my mind made up. Send word to our scouts. I want them watching Violet Town closely. Tell Baru to keep an eye on their caravan too. And have the farming team speed up the land surveys. We need to grow our own food as soon as possible. We can't keep depending on outside supplies. Yes, my lord. Weiss bowed and left.